Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching fourth part of What If Naruto Has a Broken Dojutsu. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
She hung her leg off a branch and sat there like a hungry leopard waiting for its prey to come to it. She held a single, torn picture in her hands and looked at it with sad eyes. But since she was wearing her welder's goggles, no one would be able to tell. She slowly stood up and put the picture in her pocket, which was a little frayed. She promised herself, "I'll kill him, Daddy." Under her glasses, she looked around the area. She could already tell that a group of AIM ninja were getting too close with her strong senses. She knew exactly where they were, and the team thought that if they split up and caught her from all four directions, it would throw her off. This is what her strong mind thought about. They were so badly wrong. She thought about counting backwards while she waited for the team to attack. All three jumped out of the trees at the same time, ready to fight. In the split second she gave him a sneer. That was all she thought about this team, a waste of time. As her mind went into full gear, the world around her slowed down. It could process everything faster than a supercomputer. With the extra time, she took out her butterfly knife and spun it around in her hands until the blade came out. She wasn't going to kill them, but she was sure they would learn a lesson they would never forget. When Jiraiya slammed the doors to the Sandame's office, he saw him and gave him a mean look. As the Sannin walked slowly into the office and sat down at his desk, he didn't say a word. Sarutobi might have whistled at the look Jiraiya was giving him if he wasn't trying to stay calm. Orochimaru might have flinched at the sight of it. His student didn't get angry easily. When he did, he put out the fire and used what little anger he did have as a joke. But now, a killer's intent seemed to be leaking out, and it seemed to be aimed at his old student. The old man took out his pipe and put some fresh tobacco in it while Jiraiya stared at him with enough force to burn a hole in carbonized steel. After a second, he lit it with a low-lever fire jutsu. The Hokage broke the silence by looking at his student after taking a short drag. "I'm just going to assume you've met Naruto." The calm Jiraiya replied, "So, you've been looking forward to this?" "Well, I didn't think you'd meet him this early, but yes," the older man said. "Actually, it's more like I anticipated the fit you were going to throw." Jiraiya let out a sigh and leaned back in his chair. Sarutobi Sensei always seemed to be able to see what would happen, so he should have known. Taking a deep breath to calm down, Jiraiya got himself together. It took Sarutobi a long time to wait for his student to calm down. It wasn't every day that someone found out their long thought. Dead grandson was still alive. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jiraiya asked his teacher, whose eyes were heavy with age and knowledge. "Why did you tell me that he was dead?" Sarutobi slowly replied, "It was for the best." He was very careful about what he said, because if he made a mistake, Jiraiya could turn him into toad food. "Besides, if you had raised him, I don't think fate might have blessed us the way it did." He snapped back, "What are you talking about? Have you seen his eyes?" Jiraiya's heart was racing just thinking about those eyes. He just stared at the ground as he thought about how those silvery irises looked. He got chills down his spine when he thought about another student he used to have. Sandame let out a ring of smoke and said, "You know what a transcendent bloodline is. You're aware of the Rin'negan and the Genzume, and how valuable they are, but if you're like me, then you know what Naruto has is something completely unheard of. If you had raised him, then those eyes might have activated earlier, maybe at a time when Naruto wouldn't be able to defend himself as well as he does now. Tell me, do you know Naruto's eyes do?" Jiraiya shook his head, but his eyes were still on Sarutobi's. He knew the Rin'negan was valuable, which made him wonder how important these eyes really were. "Let me tell you what's been going on for the past few months," Sandame said as he took the pipe out of his mouth. The leader of the AIM team quickly crawled away, but his legs couldn't move at all because the tendons were cut. Behind him, his team lied. One had glassy eyes that were wide open, and his whole body looked like it was shaking. What the other person was saying under his breath sounded like, "dark." He was curled up in a fetal position. The time difference was very small. They had no idea it was going to happen. She moved like a demon, cutting their legs with her knife to make them unable to move. They all fell at the same time. Before any of them could get away, she walked up to each of them and stared into their pearly eyes, sealing their doom. The leader turned around and watched the monster with the glowing eyes creep up on him. He then started to crawl even faster to a nearby katana. Someone stepped on his hand before he could touch it. He wanted to cry out in pain, but he forced himself to swallow it, trying to keep what little pride he still had. He slowly raised his head and saw Shizuka staring at him while she twisted her knife in her hands. They got on their knees so she could see his face better. He jumped back because she was so close. He did everything he could to keep his eyes off of hers, even though goggles were covering them. He asked her in fear, "What? What are you?" as she took off the goggles. "It was just not normal," she said. When she finally opened her eyes, the genin screamed bloody murder because he was stuck in a world of nightmares. Because of the noise, she put her hands over her ears and kicked him hard in the head to stop talking. She moved on to their supplies with a growl to find their scroll. It hurt her ears every time they screamed, which she hated. She spent a few seconds looking through a bunch of bags full of supplies that didn't help her before she found an earth scroll. She threw it over her shoulder and rolled her eyes. She told herself, that makes sense. They always never have what you need. Getting a heaven scroll to pass meant she already had an earth scroll. It didn't bother her. This task was just taking too much of her time. She took a deep breath, walked slowly over to a nearby branch, and took the picture out of it. A picture of a married couple who looked happy and like they didn't care about anything. A man in the robes of a cage gave the woman a soft hug while she looked like she was about halfway through her pregnancy. Those were her mom and dad. She smiled happily as she thought of them. Her sensei is said to have told her that she was a copy of her mother, but she carried herself like her father. Shizuka stopped thinking about the past when she felt a familiar chakra signature close by. This was the one thing she hated most. Before it got too far away, she slowly stood up and focused on the signature. Once she was up, she moved like a hunter on a mission. "I hope you're ready, Silver." "Eyes," she said again and again. He took it all in while putting his head on his hands. The grandfather had made his grandson a Jinchuriki and also gave him one of the 3 great Dojutsu. Naruto, in short, probably had the most potential to become the strongest ninja born in a very long time. Jiraiya tried to say this, but he just couldn't find the words. "Yes," the Sandaime replied. "It's so much to take in such a short amount of time." He didn't say anything for a few minutes while he thought about what the cage said. Naruto was the unluckiest person in the world. He was his own grandson and came from one of the most famous families in recent memory. He carried a bloodline limit that had only been heard of in stories. He wasn't sure if the luck came from his mother's side or Minato's. Jiraiya knew his luck was really bad, so it had to have come from him. As Jiraiya thought about how many people would want Naruto's head or blood, he let out a sigh. Many countries would want to kill Naruto because he is the son of the Yondaime, the grandson of a legendary Sannin, the only living heir to the Uzumaki, and the carrier of a bloodline limit that created other limits. He would either become their #1 enemy or the most valuable thing in the world. He said, "Damn," in a low voice. It just plain sucks to be him. Sarutobi got up and walked over to the window that looked out over his favorite village. He said, "I know. But it's a miracle things happened the way they did." Jiraiya barked, but he also nodded his head. It was true. If he had raised Naruto, the limit might have happened sooner. If anyone had been lucky enough to catch anything, all hell would have broken loose. He was also always moving around, which was not what a young child needed. Uriah asked, what limits has he copied? He was going to train the boy himself no matter what. So far, Sarutobi told him as he turned to face him, Hyouten, Sharingan, Byaku Chakra, Mokuton, Hyakurai, and Iruka just told me that Naruto copied the Byakugan from the Hyuga heiress. Sarutobi laughed. I hear that the two have become quite the close friends. He said out loud, that's a long list. 2 elements, 2 Dojutsu, and 2 body manipulation limits. Is he any good with any of them? If you roll your eyes and say, Naruto is a jack of all trades, master of none, his teacher will laugh again. But to make up for this, Naruto's learning rate is absolutely astounding. We're having trouble keeping up with him. Whereas it could take a single person a couple of months to learn a small percentage about their bloodline limit, Naruto can learn what they do in less than a couple of weeks. It's amazing, really. Jiraiya smiled proudly and said, Kushina was the same way. The Sandame slowly sat down again with a nice smile on his face. If anything, he learns even faster than Kushina. I bet he could learn to utilize the Rasengan in about a month with the way he learns. Jiraiya smiled and said, I'd be willing to take that bet. It didn't take long for his smile to turn into a frown, which made the teacher across from him frown. I need some info on a Komoruta Shizuka. With a raised eyebrow, Sandame asked, Komoruta? That's a name I haven't heard someone mention in a long time. There was a stack of manila folders with the files of the genin taking the exams. The old man dug through them until he found one that had the symbol of hidden twilight on it. Ishikawa Jiraiya quickly grabbed it from his sensei's hand, and along with that, he looked over everything. So there is still a Komoruta, Sandame said out loud as he rubbed his beard. Why didn't I see that name when I went through the folders? I thought Minato killed the last one during the Iwa-Konoha War. Jiraiya said in a low voice, well, obviously not. He stopped in one place and his eyes got really big all of a sudden. I'll be damned. She's the Yondaime Tsuchikage's only child. Huh? That can't be right, Sarutobi said to himself as he took the file. He looked at the girl with the fiery hair's blood test results. By the time he got to the information his student had given him, his white eyebrows had grown into his hairline. For a few seconds, or at least until he finally found his way, he quickly blinked his eyes. He spoke out loud, how could she have missed all of our scouts and spies? According to Jiraiya, it's very easy. Her mother must have tailed it out of Iwa towards the end of the war. From the looks of it, she headed towards Hakubo to hide out. If my info from my spy network is as reliable as they make it out to be, it borders northern land of Earth and eastern land of Lightning, making it disconnected from the shinobi world. It would be nothing more than a fly speck on the map. Perfect place to hide out. He agreed with a nod of the head, I can believe that. It isn't unheard of for Nuke Nin or important nobles to find a quiet out of the way place to hide out. Jiraiya said, this would also explain why she wants to kill Naruto so badly. Yesterday she made an attempt at him. Thankfully, I intervened before any permanent damage could be done, but she got away before I could detain on her. But here's the kicker, she's the holder of the Genzume. As Jiraiya watched his teacher lean back in his chair with wide eyes, he thought the teacher was having a heart attack. For the next few minutes, Sarutobi looked shocked as he stroked his beard in thought. The Sandame was negative about this information and was sure it would send Iruka and Anko into space. He did not like the idea of being the target of their rage and their pull Naruto out of the competition. It chance. After what seemed like a very long time, Sarutobi finally let out a sigh. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do. He told his master, I'm not worried about Shizuka killing him, and then he got up to leave. He turned back to the Hokage when he got to the door. I'm more worried about the Kyokugen harming Naruto. What do you mean? The Sandame asked, his eyes a little narrow. There was no doubt that this was a surprise. Why would the Kyokugen do something bad to its owner? Before you use the Kyokugen, do you know what the price is? Jiraiya asked, but his voice was tense. I don't, was the honest answer from his teacher. What is this price? Let's just say it isn't pretty. As Jiraiya spoke, the Sandame stood up and looked at his student, trying to figure out what he meant. He didn't want them to know the terrible, terrible things that were in their eyes. You know something about the Kyokugen that we don't, he realized all of a sudden. Jiraiya left before the man could ask for more information, leaving him to sit alone and think about what he had heard. Even Naruto himself had to agree that the Byakugan, along with the Hyakurai, was one of his coolest limits. Even though being able to see 350 degrees was great, he thought it would have been even better if there wasn't a black spot in his field of vision, which he didn't know was his blind spot yet. Also, having X-ray vision was really cool, but he had to work hard not to get nosebleeds at first while he was learning how to use it. Sakura was standing in front of him, and his new Dojutsu helped him tell that she was wearing lime green underwear. When Sakura looked behind her, she was shocked to see Naruto smiling and looking all over the place. He was able to avoid every tree branch and land in the right place even when he wasn't paying attention. That is, everywhere except the way they were going. She yelled, Naruto, this is serious. Which made Sasuke sigh in front of her. This is a life and death situation. He smiled and asked, really? I'm having the time of my life. Whatever. Sakura said in a low voice as she put her hand on the handle of her bloody rose katana. Just act like a ninja for once. I don't intend to go home in a body bag. She didn't get why Naruto was having fun here. It was one of the scariest times of her life for her because she knew that everyone was out to get her except her teammates. Because of this, she kept one hand on her sword and the other on her kunai pouch, which had kunai, shuriken, and a few soldier pills in it. Naruto's happy smile turned into a deep frown behind her. His teammate was right. Gaara, Shizuka, and Mr. Freaky, the creepy genin, were all after him, and he was pretty sure that if Neji and him ran into each other, it wouldn't go well. He stopped, which made his teammates stop too. When they turned around to see what was wrong, he yelled, "I think I should warn you guys about a couple of people." Because they were interested, Sakura and Sasuke landed next to him. To warn him, Sasuke said, "This better be good. You're wasting our time." Naruto said, "Oh, trust me, you will want to hear this." It made Sasuke laugh to ask, "And why now?" The longer he hung out with the loser, the more he wanted to wring his neck. "Because, there were too many people, and I already have enough of them wanting my head." Anyways, he saw Sakura. Her answer was a short shiver and a nod. "Do you remember that Gaara guy? Well, we might want to avoid him. He has a bloodline limit of some kind, and he's really good at using it." Sasuke asked, "Who is Gaara?" "This guy from Suna," Sakura said with a frown. She had to agree with Naruto. Gaara's limit was whatever it was, he could control metal, which meant he was her worst nightmare come true. It was still very scary to think about how all the metal on her body was pulled to him. "He tried to kill us this one time," she said, "but Iruka Sensei came before things could get violent. He has red hair and black rings around his eyes. You'll recognize him if we're unlucky enough to see him." Naruto moved in a strange way as he thought about his second meeting with the ghoul. He was also uneasy because he knew he was carrying Ichibi no Shukaku, which made him even more dangerous. When Naruto cleared his throat, he got their attention again and went on. "That's one of the three big ones we need to avoid. The other we should look out for is that bitch, Shizuka." They already knew. Sasuke made a face as he thought about how she had cut him with her blade. Besides her air of pride, he could also sense a special power in her that might be stronger than the Sharingan in a one fight. But based on what little he saw of her, he knew she was a con artist, which should make him her worst enemy. On the other hand, no one knew what else she had planned. The fact that she chose a very unusual weapon only added to this idea. "Number 3 is Mr. Freaky, you know, the guy from yesterday with the long tongue," Naruto said as he used his fingers to count off each avoid. The girl asked, "Why?" "Well, let's just say he scared Anko," Naruto said. "She was the one who told me to avoid him. I'm not normally one to do what she says, but I really think we should listen to her this time." "Anyone else?" Sasuke asked, surprised by how useful the information was. Gaara sounded like a bloodthirsty ghoul, Shizuka was a hot mama bear in welder's goggles, and the freak scared Anko, who is normally crazy. The Uchiha had to wonder why the better their enemy was, the stranger they were. But Naruto's information was still useful to them no matter what. Not really. "If there was someone else I would say to avoid, it would be the sound team since they probably don't like us," the blonde said. "What about that team with Lee on it?" Sakura asked herself out of the blue. Naruto made it clear, "I wouldn't worry too much about them. I know Tenten, and I think she'll put some leashes on them if we meet up," he said with a smile as he thought of something else. Then again, a rematch with Lee would be downright awesome. "Naruto, pay attention," Sakura told him when he was lost in thought. "Who else should we worry about?" As he thought about it, he put his hand on his chin. "The only other person I can think of is that Kabuto guy. He just seemed too nice. There was something about him that rubbed me the wrong way." He added, "I could see how you could see the first 3, but that seems a little off. Why should we worry about him? He's already failed the exam god knows how many times." Sasuke thought his teammate had nothing else to say, so he told them, "All right, let's keep going." The 3 of them took off, but Naruto couldn't help but frown as he followed the other 2. Shinobi were a useful form of art and a way of life where telling lies, putting on fronts, and hiding oneself was all part of the job. It was also important to learn how to read people, to find flaws in their real or made Up selves and then use those flaws to get what you wanted. Naruto is the first to admit that he didn't naturally have the all. Seeing eyes of the Hyuga are the clarity of the Sharingan. He had to learn this fine art from a very young age, though. Even if it was only partly, he could read people. Kabuto was just someone who scared him just by being there. He was unable to explain it. The four-eyed genin was hard to figure out, and Naruto didn't understand his intentions, if he had any. He put down his thoughts when his Kyokugen picked up a signature that he knew well and was starting to dislike even more than the Kyubis. He could still use his Byakugan and see the wisps of illusionary chakra in the air taking shape as a familiar figure came into view. Sakura stopped all of a sudden when she felt Naruto stop following them. When Sasuke saw that his teammates were slowing down, he did the same. When they both turned around, Naruto was stopped. He looked off into space for no apparent reason, and they could tell he wasn't pleased. Sasuke lost some of his temper and asked, "What now?" Naruto's eyes, or more accurately, the veins that were bulging around them, caught Sakura's attention. She hadn't paid attention when they stopped, but now she could see them right away. Naruto cut her off just as she was about to ask if his eyes were okay. She got a chill from what he said. The tone of his voice was the most tense they had ever heard it. "I think you guys should start running," he said. Sasuke snapped back, "Why should we?" "You idiot. We have to do this as all." Naruto yelled, "Shut up and listen to me." He also let out a killer intent to show his team he meant business. "Shizuka is here." It was over in an instant. Naruto's head shot to the left as he felt something, but it was too late. An invisible enemy took him straight through a tree and into a clearing a few feet away. A funny voice said, "I think you should listen to him." "You again," Sasuke angry. He opened his eyes, and she was right there, 2 inches from his face. A roundhouse kick sent him flying backwards before he could do anything. Sakura pulled out her sword and charged Shizuka, but Shizuka vanished. Sakura was shocked for a moment, and Shizuka punched her in the gut. The poor girl was in so much pain that she fell over and threw up what little she had eaten that morning. Shizuka came back in a flash of light and grabbed Sakura by the hair, making the girl look into her closed eyes. "I'm going to warn you right now," Shizuka warned, "if you or the Uchiha interfere in mine and Naruto's battle in any way, I won't hesitate to kill either of you straight off." Sasuke yelled as he suddenly came back with a Fuma Shuriken, "What do you have against him?" "Everything," she said in a vague way, then disappeared in another flash of light as the huge weapon hit the spot where she had been standing. As Sasuke helped his teammate get up, he winced when he heard a girl's voice echoing in the area, "Just stay out of the way, and we'll get along fine." Sasuke and Sakura watched from below as Naruto was suddenly thrown out of the clearing and through some trees, out of sight. Shizuka briefly came back to life and looked at the two of them while making a "don't bother or die" motion with her neck. "What should we do?" Sakura asked as she looked at Sasuke and saw that his Sharingan was fully charged. "If Naruto dies, we..." "I know, but we can't do anything right now," he said, his face twisted with anger as he looked at the clearing where they had been. "I can't see past her illusions even with the Sharingan." Sakura's eyes were wide and scared as she looked at him. That's when she knew Naruto was up against someone very different from him. In her mind, she prayed for her teammate and hoped he would make it through the ordeal alive. Naruto coughed up the blood that was building up in his mouth and quickly jumped up, trading his Byakugan for Hyakura as he did so. The Genzoom's biggest flaws were electricity and their strong senses. To give himself more time to beat her, he could hope for the best and hit her with a full blast of charged lightning. He knew that another of those invisible blasts was coming at him because he could feel chakra building up in the air. In order to get away from the Genzume user, he charged up his electricity and poured it all into the ground. He heard swearing coming from a nearby branch, so it worked. Naruto teased, "It sounds like I almost got you." On the other hand, Shizuka made all the trees nearby come to life. Some of them got scary faces made from the bark, while others seemed to get even scarier. "Oh, shit," Naruto said to himself as he saw all the trees look at him. "Maybe I shouldn't have pissed her off so early." As one huge hand hit the ground, he jumped out of the way. The forest floor didn't look like it could be touched, but Naruto knew that these were not real. They were hybrids that could make the real thing happen. Naruto didn't think it would be fun to turn into a red smudge on the forest floor. There were several hands coming at once, and the blonde dodged. Rolled out of the way. She then jumped out of the way on all fours as tree roots shot out of the ground like spears. Naruto clenched his teeth and moved like a dancer, dodging roots, hands, and branches. He saw a way out of the literal forest of death out of the corner of his eye and ran for it right away. He ran after it quickly, jumping over roots and branches that moved like an octopus tentacles. Tree hands tried to squash or even catch him more than once, but they couldn't. He smiled as he got close to the edge, but as soon as he stepped out of the clearing, a hand appeared out of nowhere and hit him, sending him flying back into the middle of the battlefield like a golf ball being hit by a club. As soon as someone put their hand on Naruto, he rolled out of the way. He had time to catch his breath and say a few choice words. Then, someone tried to hit him with something that looked like a big fly swatter, but he just barely moved out of the way in time. Shizuka was getting irritated in the background. It was true that he was good at moving on the wire, and he must have been very lucky to have avoided some of those hits. That was it. It was time to take things to the next level and add some strategy to the crazy game of chess they were playing. Naruto had to move faster because the tree's attacks were getting better coordinated all of a sudden. Someone would try to finish it off while someone else distracted them. He cursed as a tree root got too close to his nose to be safe. Through the corner of his eye, he saw a branch sweep across the ground to trip him. It looked like a tentacle. He jumped out of the way with no thought, but was hit by another branch. He cursed as he crashed into one of the fake trees and was immediately tethered to it by branches that were growing quickly. As she came into being, Shizuka asked, "What do you think of my illusion?" "It's my powerful demonic illusion, Nightmare Hell Forest." He looked at her carefully to make sure she was the real deal. He was glad to see it because she hadn't taken over his senses yet, so he could still feel her with his Hyakurai and Kyokugen. He had to fight the urge to smile. It was going great with his plan to bring her out into the open. It was now time for the part he still hadn't planned. Naruto broke his eyes, turning them from Iruka's dark eyes into the beautiful broken mirrors that not many people knew him for. He looked through all the copied limits and tried to figure out which one would help him get out of this mess. At the same time, he had to do as much damage as possible very quickly. "I thought of a plan." He only needed a lot of luck and for her to talk until the limit was fully activated in 7 seconds. It didn't seem like much time, but to a shinobi, every second felt like a minute. "Hey, you wouldn't mind telling me something, would you?" he asked, which made her stop moving toward him and look into his eyes. "You never did tell me the rest of that story." As she took off her goggles and showed off her unique pearlescent green eyes, she laughed. It was pretty dark nearby, which is why Naruto thought she picked this spot as the battleground. "Why should I let you listen to the rest of it?" "What did Naruto say?" "Because I'm about to die and it would only be fair," he said. He was thankful that he had goggles on as he watched her put them back on. It kept her from attacking him directly because she knew she couldn't control his senses. It also kept him safe from her more dangerous illusions. Shizuka laughed with pleasure. "Remember the deal? You had to defeat me, and looking at this, you're not going to hear it." To buy at least one more second, he asked the first question that came to mind. "Then why do you hate me so much?" "I deserve to at least know why." She stopped once more. Naruto could feel the intent to kill coming through the air. She must really want to kill him, though. "Because you look like him," she spat out as if the last word were poison. He smiled and said, "You little freak, you're crazy if that's the only reason you want to kill me." As if death wasn't staring at him already. It worked the way he wanted it to. She got angry and pulled out her balisong, then rushed him in the bum. He smiled bigger because this helped him figure out his plan even faster. He didn't want to kill her, but he was afraid his friends would see him dead. Right as she pulled the knife back to kill Konoha, she noticed that the air seemed too dry for him. She finally realized what a terrible mistake she had made. She walked right into his trap as soon as the tree caught him. After what seemed like an eternity, Naruto moved his hand away from his side and showed a kunai made of ice. He used his manipulative skills to throw it like a bullet, straight at her forehead, with the intent to kill her. Shizuka was able to stop and try to avoid the kunai only because her mind was very powerful. But the sword went through her shoulder and came out the other end in a beautiful spray of red that stained the forest floor. The force of the ice knife made her scream as she fell backwards. The pain was so strong that she began to blink in and out of consciousness. All around her, her illusions vanished in a snowfall of chakra, but Naruto cursed even then because he knew he missed. He only had a short time to finish her off before she used another trick to get away. Right away, he ran at her while making hand seals. The water in the air around him appeared on his wrists as his crystal ice swords technique. Shizuka quickly jumped up as she felt even more water leave the air. He came at her, but she dove and dodged. Rolled out of the way. He turned to follow, but stopped when a sudden pain shot through his leg. Another curse came out of his mouth as he looked down and saw that her thin kunai had turned into a pincushion. He turned around and saw that she was gone, but his limit could still tell that she was hiding in the forest. What made him even more mad was that she had healing chakra on her wound. He really should have known that. To use genjutsu, you had to have a lot of control. It made sense for her to learn high control techniques for times when she wasn't in an illusion. He yelled, "Oh, hell no!" as he chased after it. Sasuke and Sakura hid behind a tree and waited for their teammate to come back, or for the time they chose to look for his body. Even though it had only been about 4 minutes, they both felt like time was moving very slowly. "Do you?" Sakura tried to whisper, but the words were hard for her to say. "Do you think he's okay?" She held on to her katana tighter while she waited for the Uchiha to answer. Sasuke thought about it for a moment. He remembered all the battles that Team 7 had, both inside and outside. Outside meant fights with enemy ninjas, and inside meant fights between members. When someone snapped their finger, Naruto didn't just lie down and act dead. That blonde was tougher than a cockroach when it came to killing him, and he had enough power to back up how tough she was. He finally gave his answer. "He'll be alright. If not, I'll choke him when I meet him again in heaven, and then tell him it was his fault for being so stupid." Seeing Sakura smile made him feel better because he was feeling nervous. Even though she gave an anxious nod, some of her worry went away, if only for a minute. When they both heard a branch break, things finally came to a head. They both quickly jumped out of hiding with their weapons ready. Sasuke had his Sharingan and Shuriken fans in his hands, and Sakura had her bloody rose ready to fight. Both of them looked shocked when they saw Naruto standing there, bloody, beat up, and with clothes all torn up. He yelled, "Whoa, it's me you guys," and put up his hands in shock. It would have been easy for both of them to drop their weapons, but the little things in the picture made them tenser than before. If they weren't so alert, they might not have seen the small mistakes. "Take off the mask," Sakura said in a scary voice. The fake person tried to reassure them, "Wait, seriously, it's me." "No," Sasuke said in response. "Naruto never takes off his goggles for any reason. And your eyes are a shade darker than his." Like he said, the fake's blue eyes were more like sapphire than they were like Naruto's cerulean ones. Besides that, the goggles were also around his neck. Thank God their stupid teammate never took his off, because if he had, it might have been harder to spot the fake, or maybe it would have been too late. When they saw the fake, it gave them a creepy smile that didn't look good on their friendly teammate. Through a puff of smoke, Naruto changed into the strange genin that gave Anko her knife back the day before. My, he stated, "both of your skills are much better than I initially thought." When Sasuke saw the new person, he took a step back. But he remembered that the genin had scared Anko just by being there, though he didn't know why. Junin weren't the type to be on guard for no reason. Sakura's body was telling her to run, like a mouse running away from a snake that is getting ready to wrap its prey in its coils. She knew something wasn't right about him as soon as she saw him, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It made sense for her body to shake with fear. With an evil smile that made them back up, the genin said, "I really wanted to kill Naruto Kun, but it's too bad that little witch beat me to it. I do hope you two will give me a good challenge like he will for her." That's when the desire to kill hit them. He finally caught up to Shizuka, but when he used his ice sword to cut her, all he saw was another illusion. As he landed and started to look for her, he cursed and used all of his Kyokugen's powers. He was about to find her when the ground below him cracked and then burst open, letting Shizuka jump out. While trying to take Naruto's goggles off his face, she reached out and grabbed them. But he bent over and fired another ice kunai, which hit her in the side and made her fall awkwardly to the ground. Naruto stabbed the ground she was lying on, but she jumped out of the way. Before he could keep attacking, she grabbed her butterfly knife and a kunai and blocked both of them at the same time. The blonde cursed as he saw that her arm was now healed enough to use, but not enough to close the wound. She was still bleeding a lot. But every time she moved, Even though she had wounds that most shinobi could get away with, it made him feel good. As they charged at each other, Shizuka used her knives to block most of Naruto's hard blows. She leaned backwards and kicked him hard in the chin, throwing him away from her. He crossed his swords like a scissor. She was already on Naruto before he could get himself together. She was about to grab his goggles when he swept his swords outward, but she jumped back just in time. Someone put a kunai on the spot where Naruto's head used to be, so he fired one of his ice swords at her, hitting her in the thigh and sending her to the ground. In her fear, she tried to stand up, but a sandal against her chest knocked her down. Then she felt Naruto's other sword against her neck. It was very cold. He told her, "I win." "You wish, Silver." "Eyes," Shizuka replied, "but you're not the only one who can think of a plan on the wire." She glared at him at that very moment, but something wasn't normal. Naruto felt like he had been punched in the face when he was thrown back a few feet. He also felt strangely naked when he stood up. Then he felt his face, and the feeling of not having his goggles on made his eyes widen. Shizuka asked him behind his back, "Looking for these?" In a mean way. And even though every voice in his head told him not to, he did it anyway because he was scared. When the fake punch hit Naruto in the face, his glasses fell off and she picked them up. He also had a bad time when she swung them close to her own eyes. He muttered, "Oh, crap," as she turned into leaves. As he slowly stood, he could see leaves picking up in a soft breeze and circling him in a big funnel. These were the first signs of a powerful illusion he was about to fall for. It was clear to Naruto that he had been ripped off. He did something wrong when he looked into Shizuka's eyes by accident. A kunai had stuck in Sakura's forehead, which she could feel. People usually fell when things like that happened, but her hand going through it only proved what she already thought. She focused her chakra and sent out a small pulse of it, which broke up the horrible illusion. Sasuke used his Sharingan to get out of it next to her, and then he rolled over to throw up. That had to be one of the 10 worst forms of genjutsu ever. He had been through some pretty bad crap before, but that one was especially bada not Tsukuyomi bad, but still pretty bad. When the genin laughed, Sasuke glared at him so meanly that he might as well have been looking at Itachi. The freak asked as he slowly moved toward them, "Is this it?" "I expected better." She stood up and grabbed Bloody Rose as tightly as she could, but her hand was shaking. She didn't want to waste her time, but what could she do? Orochimaru made fun of her by saying, "Oh, how cute. A little sword mistress." Then he pulled at his face like it was a mask. As he did this, his eyes turned a sickly yellow color and slid open, making the genin think of a snake. "Do you really think that you could take me with that little toy?" he asked as he let go of it. With wide eyes, she took a few more steps backwards, making Bloody Rose shake even more than before. But after seeing Sasuke get better, she got her grip as steady as she could while the snake looked at her. Sasuke slowly stood up and looked through his kunai pouch for a weapon. "Sakura, back off, I'll fight him," he said. He wasn't ready for her answer. "No, I'm going to help. I'm not useless like before." He tried to tell it to Sakura. He didn't even finish his thought when she yelled at him again. "I'll distract him while you go and make a trap." The boy with dark hair tried to argue, but Sakura took a soldier pill from her kunai pouch and swallowed it, which gave her a short boost of chakra. She quickly began a set of hand seals that Sasuke didn't know and couldn't copy with his Sharingan on. Orochimaru stopped moving forward and raised an eyebrow. It looked like this little girl had just the right amount of guts to do a jutsu, but he could tell that this move would be hard on her small chakra reserves because she was going through so many seals. She finally stopped on Ox. Metal release. Dragon spine. When Orochimaru heard the word, "by element," his eyes got even bigger with surprise. Everything was made even stranger when Sakura stepped on the ground and sent a trail of metal spikes quickly heading toward him. He jumped to the side, but then jumped again when they started to follow him like a bloodhound on the trail. The snake jumped all over, but every place he touched turned into a new set of metal spikes. When Sasuke was next to Sakura, his mouth dropped. After seeing Naruto's ice moves, he thought the jerk couldn't beat Sakura's metal moves. His shock at not being able to copy the attack grew even stronger. Did Sakura get a bloodline limit all of a sudden? If that's the case, how long did she hide it? It was getting hard for Sakura to keep it up. She only had a small amount of chakra left, so she couldn't use the full power of this attack. It needed a lot of chakra to work, and it was supposed to be much stronger. Orochimaru jumped up into a tree to get away from the dirt because he knew the metal element had to be grounded in the ground. But before he could calm down, a spike quickly grew in the tree and pointed at him. It stopped an inch from his face just as he was about to jump off. He could see why when he looked at the girl. Sakura had run out of chakra and was lying on the ground. Sasuke walked over to her and said, "Sakura." She only said, "Go," as she got up again and took out another soldier pill. Following his nod, she gave him one last look before leaving for the forest to set up a trap. When Sakura turned to face her enemy, Orochimaru punched her in the face and threw her across the clearing. She prayed to the gods that she still had the soldier pill and took it while lying on the ground, and Orochimaru slowly moved toward her again. She jumped up quickly, dove under his kick, and grabbed a kunai. But before she could stab him, he bowed down in a bad way and grabbed her hand. Afterward, Orochimaru threw her back to where they had begun. She was walking slowly toward him. "You have a lot of potential," he told her. She grabbed her katana, which she had found next to her. There was no stopping her from shaking when she saw his yellow eyes that looked like snakes. Who was this man? He had to be a monster that looked like a person. She wasn't going to fight just any other ninja. Those thoughts made her fear even worse than it was before. "But you lack so much at the same time," he said, touching a nerve in her heart. "You're indeed the weakest member of your team." Even though things were bad for her, Sakura couldn't help but cry as the ugly genin told her the painful truth. He was right, she had to agree. Naruto or Sasuke always saved her or did the hard work when there was a battle. She just watched over people or did dumb work. She was sick of that, though. For her team, she would be strong. "You're right," she told him, "but I refuse to stay the same." She could feel a rush of adrenaline going through her body as she did a move Sasuke taught her. They were counting on her to distract the monster for a short time so Naruto could win his fight and then look for them. She wouldn't let them down. In that moment, her determination to get stronger grew stronger than ever. She wasn't going to lie down and act like she was dead. She then let out a roar and charged forward, her katana ready to strike. The first blow was blocked by Orochimaru, but she seemed to have sped up in her righteous rage because she already had a second attack ready, so he had to grab a second kunai and block it too. However, he did something that Sakura knew was not genin level. He caught the katana between the two knives and then broke Bloody Rose with strength more like a junin. Sakura jumped backwards while holding on to what was left of her valuable sword. She was shocked. She looked scared with wide eyes. Someone who shouldn't have been here was in the way of Sasuke and her. It's clear why Anko was so upset. When Orochimaru rolled up his sleeve, a complicated tattoo showed. After biting his thumb and wiping the blood on it, the biggest snake Sakura had ever seen appeared in a puff of smoke. It had to be at least 100 feet long, and its master was smiling meanly behind it. He told his summoner, "Devour her," which made the snake hiss with pleasure. Sakura put her beloved katana's broken pieces in her kunai pouch. She didn't know why, but she wanted to keep her sword and maybe fix it later. She then started doing hand seals for the first move that came to mind. Orochimaru was very interested in the girl as she finished the seals and couldn't wait to see what other metal moves she had planned. Metal release. Dragonfly Weaver. She punched the ground, which made it shake a little. When she pulled out her hand, a long metal pole came out, revealing a beautiful spear that she spun around for fun. The traitor was getting ready by licking his lips. This girl might be useful to him. What happened next would determine whether she was useful to his cause or he would be kind and end Sakura. Chan's suffering. The snake that was called shook its head to figure out the best way to attack. The animal roared and charged straight at the stupid person, thinking it could swallow it before it ran away. Sakura jumped as high and hard as she could, making the snake eat dirt. She then landed on its head with the spear first, slamming it into its skull. Although it swung around wildly to try to get the girl off, Sakura held onto the spear with her chakra stuck to the scales. The snake tried to shake her off but failed. So it slithered as fast as it could toward a tree with its head down to squash her. Because Sakura was smart, she jumped away and watched as the snake slammed into it, making the spear go straight through its body and into its brain. As it went away in a cloud of smoke, she let out a sigh of relief. As soon as Sakura felt a cold hand around her throat, she stopped breathing. Sakura felt a small amount of genjutsu and then she lost the ability to move her limbs. She was paralyzed with fear. She clenched her teeth and thought about what he was going to do to her. A scary voice whispered in her ear, "You're useful to me after all." It was much deeper and belonged to an older, more evil man, but not to the genin who was using it at the moment, Sakura could tell. "I only plan to give this gift to Sasuke," he said, "but I know you'll enjoy it as well. You'll come to me, seeking the power you so desire." A tear fell from the corner of Sakura's eye as she felt the sharp tips of two fangs pierce the side of her neck. As soon as they walked in, she got a terrible, burning shot all over her body. This broke the illusion she was in and made her scream as she fell to the ground. Sasuke yelled, "Sakura!" as he jumped into the clearing. He was done setting up the secret trap. When she stopped yelling, he ran to her side, but he could still hear Sakura gnashing her teeth. She was gasping for air and shaking so much that it looked like she was having a seizure. It hurt so much for her that she closed her eyes and passed out after Sasuke stared at her for a few seconds. You jerk!" Sasuke yelled as he stood up and stared at the monster that was watching him. "What the hell did you do to her?" "Nothing," Sasuke heard the deeper, darker voice for the first time. "I thought she was worthy enough, so I gave her a little gift. Of course, there's always a 1 in 10 chance that she'll die." The Uchiha was so angry that his Sharingan turned on by itself. Orochimaru was thrilled to see a new Tomoe enter the boy's eyes, which made his Dojutsu even stronger. "Splendid," he said as he took off his mask, showing Konoha's most infamous traitor's real face. "Let us fight Uchiha Sasuke, and let me see if you're as worthy as she was." The famous Orochimaru caught him off guard, but it wasn't enough to scare Uchiha Sasuke away. If anything, knowing that the traitor had the nerve to come back and cause trouble in his old home made him very angry. Of course, the traitor who attacked Sakura, someone he couldn't believe he cared so much about it, was an even worse sin. He hurt someone very important to him. There was punishment in hell. Sasuke charged Orochimaru with a smirk on his face and roared like a lion. Naruto slowly looked around, keeping his last sword ready in case he heard anything just a little off. He could tell that the leaves all around him were making a bad illusion that wasn't good for his health. There was a light breeze whistling in the area, but it made Naruto feel even more scared. He could no longer use his Kyokugen's sensing powers because all he could feel was a fuzzy feeling all around. He also couldn't spend 16 seconds changing limits because those seconds would turn out badly for him. But Hyouden could only be very useful if he could see his opponent. The blonde looked at his sword when he heard a sound like it breaking. He cursed as he saw the pieces of it on the ground. When he looked up, he saw a small picture of Shizuka smiling and twirling her butterfly knife between her fingers. There was no longer any sign of the girl as he fired an ice kunai at it with a growl. It wasn't hard to see that she was way ahead in this fight, but she knew it too. In that very second, a cut showed up on his shoulder. "I hate that bitch," he said in a low voice. It was clear that she didn't like being called names. Naruto had to be smart. There must be a way to fix this. But the chances looked so bad. He wished he knew a few more ice moves, especially one that would help him defend, but he couldn't find any. On the other hand, he was working on that one. That wasn't the best move for defense, but it would give him some space and maybe some time. As Haku's third ninjutsu, he quickly went through a set of hand seals. When he stopped on dog, the air around him got thinner. Ice release, winter shards. Shizuka, who couldn't be seen, backed off a bit as water quickly spun around him in a big dome. He then pushed the wind chakra into the water. Using the speed of the spinning water, he threw thousands of ice chunks in all directions. The sizes of the chunks ranged from very small to shuriken size. It was like everything was made of ice, even Shizuka, who was too close. There was blood all over her, and she looked at him with a shocked look. Then she smiled and slid down into the mud. Naruto was the next one to be scared. That damn clone. He was supposed to be good at that move, but it was a clone that beat him. "You liar to think I don't know moves other than genjutsu," she told him in a voice. "Play time is over. It's time to end this." Naruto could only open his eyes wider before he was suddenly torn apart by an enemy that he couldn't see. He was getting so many cuts that he almost screamed. Every part of his body was getting hurt. He wasn't able to leave. It hurt all around him, and he could feel cold steel piercing his skin. This wasn't a trick like the last time. This time she was killing him. He dropped to his knees, sucked in hard, and lost blood quickly. He looked like someone had broken glass across his back, face, and limbs by the time she was done with him. He thought she had slid the knife between his ribs, cut both lungs, and maybe even come close to cutting the heart. He looked like a bloody mess now. Everything around him was stained with his blood, and he couldn't do anything about it. He felt like his eyelids were getting heavy all of a sudden, like he was so tired that he couldn't keep them open. He felt like someone was pulling him away because his body was numb. At the same time, he heard a sweet voice telling him to go home. When he thought about it later, he thought that might have been his mother. He knew for sure that he was going to die. He slowly closed his eyes to forget about his last moments of life. In the gaps, he could see Shizuka getting closer. She laughed and stood in front of him with her hands on her hips. "I guess you'll never hear the end of the story," she said. "I'll admit, you gave me a run for the money, but in the end it doesn't matter." She got on her knees next to him and held his chin up so he could look into her eyes. "This is my way of getting back at you for killing my father, Namikaze Naruto. In the same way, he died, torn and chopped up. Enjoy being dead." While she watched Naruto slowly die, Komoruta Shizuka stood up and slowly backed away. She smiled to herself. After that, she turned around and started to walk away while putting her balisong away. He was sure that he would die if he blinked one more time. He did everything he could to keep his eyes open, but it was terrible. They began to fall slowly, covering the world in a darkness that would never end and swallow him up. "Noah, I can't pass away." It got louder and louder as the angel of death spoke. "Too many people care about me. Yamato, Iruka, Sandame, Kakashi, Anko, and Kakashi Tenten, Sakura, Sasuke, and others. Hi, Hinata." He started to cry silvery tears when he thought of her name. He didn't have much time left. He became best friends with her. She knew all the bad things he did and cared about him. Even if it was just for her, he had to live. Who else would take care of her like he did if he left? After that, he shut his eyes. "Naruto, never give up hope," a calm voice told him. He opened his eyes and saw himself in his mind, looking into the dark blue eyes of his dead friend Haku. His friend was dressed in a white kimono that was as pure as his soul. He smiled and greeted Naruto as if he had never died, just like when they were picking herbs. He looked at himself and saw that the cuts Shizuka had given him were gone, and the clothes Anko and Iruka had bought him were no longer torn. His thoughts had also changed. The mirror's cracks seemed to be getting better on their own, and the water he was standing in looked like the silver he cried over. He took a quick glance at Kyuubi's cage and saw that the demon wasn't there. He smiled at Haku and turned back to her. It looked like his friend was also his guardian angel. "Hey Naruto, what's wrong? Why do you look so sad?" asked Haku. "I'm so tired," Naruto said in a sad voice. "I don't know if I can keep going." "Are you going to quit?" "That's not the Naruto I remember," Haku told him in a soft voice. After a short moment, Naruto thought about it. He never gave up easily, but it was really hard for him. People really did want him dead, and each one seemed to get stronger. Could he really keep going? "Naruto," he said as he turned back to Haku. He was about to cry out in anger and sadness. The boy in front of him still had that sad smile that made him feel better. Everyone carries some kind of weight. Some people have more to carry, but no one has too much. They might give up and stop, or they might keep going. I agree that things are hard for you, but this amount is just right for you. That's what makes you so special. You can do things that no one else can. Naruto gave a quick nod after a second. Yes, things did bring him to this point, and the only thing he could do was keep going until the load got lighter. "Naruto," Haku said with a sad frown instead of a smile, "you have a beautiful but terrible power. It has eaten a lot of people in the past. The mirror flower costs a lot, and if you grab it, you'll also grab this curse." The silver flower from Naruto's dreams took shape in Haku's hand. The boy who was cursed knew that looking at it would make him stronger, but it would also eat him up. The person who used to use Hyouden put out his hand and gave the boy the rose. "I wouldn't touch it if I were you," said a voice that Naruto really didn't like. When Naruto turned around, he saw the Kyuubi standing with them on the water. Her smile was alluring, and she put out her hand for him to take. But Naruto stepped back. "Please come to me instead," She smiled like an angel and told him, "I'll give you what you want. I'll ease that load. If you take that rose, you'll regret it immediately." His sad smile came back as he turned back to Haku. "No matter where you look, power has a price. You can make either choice. What you want makes a difference. That's why he should come to me," Kyuubi said. "I will make him great. If I give him my power, he'll become shogun. People will love him and think he's the best." Naruto closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, they were more determined than they had ever been. He slowly walked over to Haku, which made the Kyuubi look shocked at his choice. Haku held out the rose and said, "The price for this power is high, Naruto. Are you sure about this?" "I am," he replied right away. Haku gave a nod. "Just remember, the choice between the mirror flower and the fox is always open." However, the Kyuubi shook her head behind Naruto as he took the flower with care. Her box was too close to the light. He was going to pay for it now. The Kyuubi said in a whisper, "Enjoy your mistake," as she watched Naruto leave his mindscape. Shizuka stopped when she felt something cool across her body, like cold steel rubbing against her skin. "No way," she said to herself as she turned around in shock. She took a step back in shock when she saw what she saw. Silver chakra started to flow off of Naruto like a silver wind as he slowly stood up. After that, the rush got stronger until the chakra started to spiral around its master. It moved all over the place like fire 1 minute and smoothly like water the next. Naruto's wounds started to heal very quickly. As they did, his blood turned silvery and shiny in front of Komoruda's eyes. Silver tears slowly fell from his eyes as his birthmarks got clearer. His hair started to fade until it was a shimmering silver metal. Shizuka clenched her fist and ground her teeth as she watched him fully rise. Her eyes also gave off a dangerous glow, and her illusionary chakra warped the air around her. She lost her temper and finally yelled, "Why won't you die?" The answer she got was not what she thought it would be. "Because they all depend on me," Naruto said in a voice that seemed to echo. One time in Shizuka's life, she didn't know what to say. Naruto felt cold, like his blood had slowed down all of a sudden. Another thing that made him feel like he was falling was like a cord that was stopping him from falling into a deep hole suddenly snapped. He got stronger as he fell. When Shizuka opened his eyes, he stepped back in shock. Now that they were fully awake, the whites of his eyes turned silvery too. But this wasn't what made her step back. He had a window into his soul through his eyes, and she could see a sea of crazy from those eyes. Anko laid down on top of her desk and ate a lot of her usual boxes of dango, but not as enthusiastically as she usually does. If anything, each bite made her frown worse. When her current stick was done, she jumped it like a senbon at the wall, where it stuck perfectly at the end of a line of similarly thrown skewers that almost perfectly formed Konoha's leaf symbol. She had eaten so many sticks that she had lost track. Her mind was all over the place, mostly with worry about her little brother. She stood up and opened the next box with a sigh. In fact, it was her 15th, but she didn't know that. She thought to herself, "Why'd I feel like this day is only going to get worse?" As she smoked another stick. With perfect accuracy, she finished the Konoha symbol with the last stick she had eaten. She kept eating her favorite comfort food even after that. She was trying to figure out if today was a bad day or not. First, she woke up with the worst hangover she had had in a long time. For Anko, hangovers were like Batsumetsu for most people. It was making her sick that Naruto was in the forest of death. Iruka had not yet stopped by to say hello, which he had been doing more often since she started taking care of the cute blonde idiot. As Anko threw the last empty box of her favorite treats into the stack in the corner of her office, she stopped to think. On top of everything else, she had just run out of dango. I thought for a moment that she should curse the gods for her bad luck, but she didn't because it might be rude. Things like that made the gods laugh in a strange way, and they probably got a kick out of making things worse. Don't make her day even worse than it already is. But she couldn't help but think of ways that her day could get worse. At that moment, her office door slammed open, letting a panting Chunin in. He looked like he had been running for miles without any chakra to help him. I cursed it. She thought to herself, feeling a little down, and stood up straight to at least look scary. Anko asked, "What do you want?" She wasn't sure if she had really meant to kill him because the man didn't move. He answered in a huff, "Mitarashi." "San, our men found something disturbing." She rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, Cammy. I can feel the headache coming on already. I can't believe I lost that aspirin." She asked quickly, "What happened?" With her arms crossed and her eyes narrowed. "Well." He took a long time to answer, which made the Junin even more angry than she was already. "We found the bodies of 3 Kusa genin near the fence at training area 44. Anko's body's blood all of a sudden turned cold. When we found them, the Chunin said, we thought they had been dead for more than a day. But what really caught our attention was that." He stumbled. "Spit it out, damn it." Anko yelled as she jumped off her desk, which scared her employee. She tried not to, but worry filled her eyes and voice. He cringed because he thought her anger would get worse because she was stuttering. T. Their faces were ripped off after they were killed. When the Junin powered punch didn't happen, he looked back at her and saw that she looked shocked. She looked around at the floor to figure out what she should do. She walked around for a second with her hand over her mouth. She didn't even have to look at the bodies to know that the Genin team had done a good job. Something about it felt creepy, and the more she thought about it, the worse it felt. After becoming the most wanted criminal in the Konoha bingo book, her ex-sensei didn't have the guts to go back to Konoha. However, the proof was as clear as day. The Chunin who didn't give his name carefully watched his boss. Mitarashi Anko was one of the most unpredictable people in the world. It was very strange for the village to see her nervously moving around the room and swearing every once in a while. For a split second, he thought about whether she was going to give him the finger for ruining her day. After another minute, Anko finally told the truth, frowning as a drop of sweat ran down her face. The jerk with the yellow eyes and belly was back. When she thought about Naruto being in the forest of death, her eyes got really big. Oh my god, Naruto. Her eyes showed a little fear when she looked up, as if something important to her was in danger. You, she said to the Chunin who wasn't named. At this point, she didn't care about her reputation. Naruto was in the worst possible danger. Go find Iruka Amino, then report your findings to the Hokage. And move as if a fire is under your ass, or I'll kill you if I see you again. He already knew. You did what Anko told you to do if she said she would kill you. If you hadn't, she wouldn't have been afraid to follow through with her threat. He ran out of the room like a rat running away from a snake without giving it a second thought. The next second, Anko ran as fast as she could out the door. As soon as she got out of the building, she used the Junin trained muscles to move as quickly as possible to get to the forest. She prayed that her little brother would be safe. Thank you, if you were up there. And Orochimaru was back in town. If Naruto and Orochimaru met, even by accident, his life would turn into hell on earth. He had his eyes closed when he took the silver flower from Haku's hand. The feeling of holding on to the end of a rope while it was being cut quickly took over all of a sudden. He tried hard, but he just couldn't open his eyes and see where he was. At that moment, he heard the sound of a rope snapping under stress, and he felt like he was going to fall. As he fell head first to wherever he was going, air rushed by him. It was like his mouth was locked shut, so he couldn't scream. It was like his eyes wouldn't open, and as he fell, not a single muscle would move. The rush of air that made him hold his breath and whip his hair was the only thing he could feel. He lost more and more of himself as he fell. He remembered every painful thing, even the ones he thought he had forgotten. He didn't know why, but he was sad right now, but a strong desire came over him and seemed to overpower everything else. He had a strong feeling rush over him as this warm, dark feeling began to fill him. He couldn't explain it. It was both good and bad, and it felt so strange in his body, like it wasn't his to feel. There were only a few words that Naruto said before they disappeared in the wind. What's happening to me? You've really done it this time, a redhead who was staring hatefully at a dark-haired boy with stormy eyes said. Haku did nothing but stare back at the Kyuubi when she was human. Naruto-kun simply chose for himself. Her answer was, then why didn't he choose me? I could have given him everything he ever wanted. But no, he has to go with you, pretty boy. The air was filled with an angry desire to kill as she yelled. As Kyuubi let out more of her anger in the now beautiful antechamber, she started to look more wild. She showed that her power was going down, but it didn't even make Haku flinch. He just shook his head and looked even more sad than before. Then he gave the demon in front of him a nice smile, which made her even more angry. A red haze started to form around her, which meant she was about to hit the one-tailed form. The last thing he said was, "What is the price of your power?" There was a moment when the raw power that was starting to fill the room suddenly went away. Kyuubi hid his face in shame and turned away, making a mean face. Haku went on, "Power has a price," which made Kyuubi's frown even worse. To gain is to lose. And to lose is to gain. What is the price that Naruto would have to pay should he choose you? She reluctantly and slowly answered, and the words came out as if she had just eaten something really gross. The price I pay for my power is. She clenched her teeth for a second. As she looked at Haku, she could be seen grinding her teeth. Naruto thought the kid in front of her was the same as her, but she didn't know why. People thought she was the best because she had fought a lot and never lost. But now she was so low because of that blonde rat with no hair. She asked through clenched teeth, "Who are you?" Killer intent filled the air again, and her hands clenched into fists. When Haku smiled, it turned into a sad frown. He looked into the liquid they were standing on for a few seconds, as if he were trying to collect his thoughts. Kyuubi's angry voice echoed, "Answer me when I talk to you, damn it." "I am only a representation of the Kyokugen," Haku said in a low voice as he kept looking down. "I am Haku, but at the same time, I am the portrayal of the cost of such power." When Kyuubi heard that, his angry scowl quickly turned into a sneaky smile. "Really?" Her smile looked even worse than it did before, if that's possible. That does explain so much. She started to slowly and seductively walk back to her cage, as if she was happy for now. For a second, the Queen of the Foxes stopped because she had a new thought. Haku watched as she kept staring into her cage. It looked like she was thinking about what to say next. "I wonder what would scare him more," she said in a soft voice that echoed through the space. "Myself, and the power that I could give him, are you, at least when he learns the cost of the Kyokugen." "I have no idea," Haku said in a low voice. Before going behind the bars, the redhead vanished. She slowly sank back into the darkness, casting a creepy red glow as she went deeper into Naruto's mind. Shizuka looked at Naruto with wide eyes and watched as the chakra danced all over him. The feeling of cold steel rubbing against her skin came back every time the wind touched her. It was the silver chakra that filled the air. The sheer amount was incredible. There was a rustling sound coming from the trees, like the leaves were getting ready for a big weather game that was about to start. Wildlife and birds nearby screamed in fear and ran away to a safe place, away from the fight that was about to start. Shizuka was knocked off balance by another gust of wind that hit the area quickly. She stumbled for a while. When she got her balance back, she was shocked when she looked into Naruto's silvery eyes by accident and saw her scared, broken reflection for a split second in his mirrored irises. She wasn't sure for a second if that was really her. There was nothing she was afraid of, but she could feel fear slowly taking over her. She thought she had smashed that out of her soul a long time ago, but it was clear that she was still feeling ways from that part of her mind. She shut her eyes tight to push down the fear that was rising in her chest. There was nothing but power here. There was nothing to worry about. She still couldn't look into his eyes again. She felt shocked again when she saw Naruto's face. He's changing even more. The well-defined whisker marks started to turn silver, making it look like someone had used sandpaper on painted metal. His hair turned pale, and by the end it looked like he had metallic silver strands all over his head. All of a sudden, the rush of chakra faded into its master, carrying what looked like evil wind with it. The air around Naruto still seemed to be warped by the raw power he was giving off. She asked in a sneering whisper, "What are you?" Naruto tightened and loosened his grip on his hands. Then he slowly brought his right hand to his face and watched as the air around it changed shape. It was as cold as ice on his body. He wanted to shiver, but he never did. The cold air around him made his breath feel the same. Just under his skin, the chakra moved in a crazy way, ready to be used in a devastating attack. The boy with the sunburn then did something that was very different from him. He smirked. Even though he was very cold, he couldn't get enough of this feeling. He wanted to use more and more of this new source of power until it was empty. He thought to himself in a quiet voice, "I wonder what kind of Kyokugen ability this is." He then made a face as he remembered something he had said not long before. But he couldn't remember what it was about. He thought it had something to do with his friends and wanting to protect them. Who did he hang out with? He didn't need anything else now that he had this new power. When he felt another being nearby, all of his senses went into high gear. Shizuka was the only person he could find when he looked around. It was clear that she was ready to defend herself because her hand was slowly moving toward her butterfly knife. He didn't know why, but he wanted to touch her blood. Shizuka jerked back as a sudden killer intent filled the area. Her heart rate was rising every second, making her sweat more. It felt like a ton of weight was being put on her shoulders. She was fighting so hard that she could barely keep her balance, that her breath got more labored. She thought quickly as she swayed, "I've never felt such a strong desire to kill in all my life." She finally got down on one knee and instinctively put her hand to her mouth as she felt her breakfast come back to life. The killer intent left as quickly as it came on, just before she could throw up. He told her, "I don't need to see you puke," with a hint of cruel amusement in his voice. "I'd probably get sick just from watching you." She got a chill from hearing him. She couldn't help but think of the cold, bloody edge of a sword that was poised at the throat and ready to kill. She could also picture the person holding the sword, a cruel killer dressed in red from head to toe and smiling. When she looked up at him, she was panting and sweating so much that she almost had to force her head up. The man had the creepiest grin on his face when she looked into his eyes. Her nerves were set off by his eyes though. Like the ones she had seen before, they looked like they belonged to a crazy demon that had been let loose on the world without warning, not the sarcastic blonde who was holding them now. "This is not the same person I just fought." Taking off her hat, she wiped the sweat off her forehead, stood up, and flipped her balisong back and forth between her fingers. What took place? What power does the Kyokugen have? Naruto kept smiling in a creepy way. A quiet laugh came from him as he looked at her knife and saw how it sparkled in the little light that came through the trees. He found the thought funny. She was going to fight back. It almost seemed sad. Naruto taunted her, "Don't die too soon on me," and he clenched and unclenched his fists at his sides to get ready. "I need a guinea pig to test my new powers on." "Funny," she said without showing any emotion, but the words made her nervous, and she tried hard to hide it. "I was just about to tell you the same thing." The young man with the silver eyes smiled meanly as he felt a small amount of tension coming from her. It made him want to show her how weak she was to remember their last fight and how sure of herself she seemed back then. Naruto asked with a knowing smile as he leaned forward a bit. "Are you scared? I thought you were afraid of nothing." She answered quickly, "Why would I be scared?" Her eyes narrowed and she smiled in a way that made Naruto think of Sasuke, which made his hand twitch even more because he wanted to rip her lips off her face. "I'm not afraid. I'm just excited. This is going to be the biggest battle I've ever fought." He felt like he had to throw up because she looked so much like his jerk of a teammate. "I know somebody who said the same thing, and then got his ass handed to him royally," he joked with her. He stood in a way that Shizuka wasn't used to seeing him fight. Naruto felt it was time to show off the Wraith Fist and take out the annoying redhead a few times, or maybe 30 times. She was going to stop making him mad now. He told her, "All right, let's do it." Shizuka opened her eyes once, and then he appeared 2 inches away from her face, his right fist ready to land a very hard uppercut. At the sight of Sasuke running at him while yelling angrily, Orochimaru smiled. His Sharingan flashed in his eyes. "Oh, Sakura." While the Uchiha ran forward, he thought back to seeing her body lying on the ground, not moving and barely able to breathe. Her neck was bleeding from an odd wound. It made him even more angry. His few close friends, Sakura, had become very important to him, and now he might lose her. And it was all because of the stupid grass snake that was in front of him. The first thing he did was pull out a set of shuriken that were bound to a very thin wire that you could hardly see. The former Sannin had to jump out of the way when he threw them at him. Before his opponent could hit the ground, Sasuke moved his fingers and turned his metal stars into a Ryu to attack the weak ninja. He only got a short look of surprise from Orochimaru and then another smirk that looked like a snake. Sasuke could only see the snake pull out a kunai so quickly with the Sharingan. Without it, his hand would have been a blur. The next second, a blurry arm cut the thin wires on his shuriken, taking away his control over the weapons. As soon as Orochimaru stepped down, he looked up and saw Sasuke following suit. Sasuke was learning the hand seals for his signature move, the Grand Fireball technique. A laugh came out of his mouth as the fireball hit him. The boy with dark hair landed on the ground. He looked around with his Sharingan and saw only a burned out mud mound, which made him sad. It was obviously an earth clone. He drew a kunai by the ring at the end of the handle and twisted it on his finger as his red eyes got even more narrow. It was making him jumpy that he couldn't figure out where his target was. Before he could start to think about where the real thing had gone, he saw a small amount of movement out of the corner of his eye. The enemy hit him hard, and he instinctively dove under it, but he wasn't ready for the knee that went into his stomach. Before Orochimaru could put his elbow on the boy's back, Sasuke flicked the wrist that held the kunai, cutting Orochimaru in the thigh and making him hiss and jump backwards. Sasuke stared at Orochimaru and held his stomach as the traitor moved toward him. Just as the traitor got close enough to punch, the man with the snake eyes sped up so fast that he left only a cloud of dust behind him. Sasuke wasn't ready for it, but he was thrown into a tree, making a dent in the trunk with his splinters and a short stream of blood from his mouth. Orochimaru sped up again, making Sasuke's body only a blurry outline as he wiped the blood off his chin. Sasuke then took a bunch of punches so quickly that his body didn't have time to feel the pain before he was thrown through the other side of the tree. Sasuke lay on his back on the ground for a few seconds. The sharp pain in his lungs made it clear that he had broken more than one rib. He groaned as he rolled over and spat out the blood that had built up in his mouth. His face was badly hurt, and blood was coming out of his nose and mouth. One of his eyes was already swollen, and it felt like someone had hit him in the stomach over and over with a mace. It hurt him a lot. How pathetic, Orochimaru said to himself as he watched Sasuke slowly stand up. He didn't try to hide his disappointment. Even Sakura-chan put up a better fight. He glared past his bloody face with such force that even Itachi might have raised an eyebrow in pride. Just. Sasuke growled. Just shut the hell up. That comment made Orochimaru smirk in a funny way. Oh, so you have a special connection to Sakura-chan? How cute. Maybe you two could come to me together, but that's if you live. I said, Sasuke said through clenched teeth, his eyes spinning with more fear than he knew how to handle. Shut up. Why? The snake asked again. You're so weak. Your teammate Sakura lasted much longer than you have. Orochimaru smiled as he thought of a way to get Sasuke's goat. He rubbed his chin to make it more interesting, which made the Uchiha across from him narrow his eyes. I bet even Naruto-kun would have put up a better fight. Maybe I should look for him instead of. He didn't get to finish his thought because Sasuke started throwing fireballs at him out of the blue. Orochimaru quickly dodged them, almost grinning because they missed him so easily. But he didn't expect the shuriken to be hiding the flames with more thin wire. Sasuke moved his fingers, and the wires wrapped around Orochimaru's legs and ankles before he could do anything. As the snake became more aware of what was happening, Sasuke pulled hard on the wires. When Sasuke threw Orochimaru off balance, he became very angry and started spinning his enemy in the air. He let go of the wires when he thought he had enough speed. The traitor Sannin was thrown off the clearing and right into his trap. Orochimaru looked down as he fell and saw the wire trap that was meant to cut him up. He dug his fingers into the side of the tree, leaving a trail of gouge marks on the bark. He was surprised by how smart and resourceful his prey was, and he might have even been a little desperate. As the target's speed slowed down, Sasuke jumped after him and landed heel first on the target's stomach, making him move faster again. Orochimaru was being cut up by the sharp wire, and the Uchiha held onto the tree and watched with dirty pleasure. But his excitement quickly turned to anger as he watched the clone turn into mud. Orochimaru's heel went into the back of his head while he was still thinking about what had happened. This caused him to fall right into his own trap. Nice try, Sasuke-kun. Orochimaru yelled as he took the boy's place behind him. At the very end, Sasuke used Plan B, and did a replacement that would have made any Junin's head spin. Instead of him, there was a big ball about the size of a man's head made of exploding tags. What made the Sannin swear was that one of the tags was quickly getting hot. Sasuke was running for his life a few stories above his trap. There was no way in hell he was going to stay for something that big after leaving behind that much explosive power. An enormous explosion ripped through the area just as Sasuke was getting as far away as it was safe to be. The shockwave picked him up and threw him into the air, His feet were above him as he rolled over a few more feet and hit a tree upside down. The Uchiha rubbed the side of his face as he realized that he may have given his creation too much power. He had to correct himself in a rude way by thumping it. What a mess that bomb was. It had enough power to destroy several nearby buildings at the same time. Sasuke was about to let out a sigh of relief when he realized that this was probably the end of the battle. But the sound got stuck in his throat as he saw a figure walk through the flames a few feet in front of him, smiling. Orochimaru told him, "I was nice earlier." He still had that sickening grin on his face. "But after that little stunt, I think I'll make this a little bit more difficult for you." With a curse under his breath, Sasuke held onto the tree he had rolled onto as he forced his sore legs to stand up. He thought to himself, "Damn it, my trap didn't work." He tried to come up with another plan. What is this weirdo made of? Orochimaru came at him the next second, running very fast and becoming a blur. Naruto snorted in anger as the Shizuka he had hit with an uppercut turned into light, which was the sign of a genjutsu. He forgot that she was in charge of his senses, which meant she was still in charge of the battlefield. It wasn't necessary to be Nara to know that this fight would last a long time. Another copy of the girl shot out of the ground, and the boy, who now had silver hair, dove as her knife edge reached for his jugular vein. That thing didn't even come close. Naruto was faster than ever, so he was behind the fake and punched it out before it could even register his movement. There were 4 more that came out of the tree trunks and shot at him very quickly. Naruto put out a hand and moved a foot to steady himself. His chakra gathered in his hand. As soon as the fakes got close enough, he let out a single burst of unstable chakra that sent an invisible shockwave of pure chakra out and destroyed them all at once. Shizuka carefully watched from the shadows while sending out more fake clones. Her smart mind watched Naruto's movements and noticed how much faster he moved now that he had the Kyokugen's new power. He was already 3 times as fast as before, and it looked like he was getting even faster. For the second time, she sent out twice as many clones as the first time. Again, she kept a close eye on him. Not only did he become much faster, but he also became much stronger. As shown by the fact that he broke her clone's knife with his bare hands. Even more tears came to her eyes as she saw the small cut he had made heal almost right away. She made a mental list of the abilities she had seen so far: greater speed and strength, healing almost instantly, and more. She let her eyes get bigger as Naruto again took chakra into his hands. He quickly spread his arms wide, making 2 crescent-shaped, high speed silver chakra blades that cut one clone in half and cut off the head of the one next to it. She had also forgotten to add that she had the highest level of raw chakra manipulation. This new, unknown chakra could be used in ways she had never seen before. For example, it could be used to create very damaging shockwaves and long-range attacks like the crescent-shaped blades. Shizuka stepped down when she saw that there was nothing else to look at. All of the clones that Naruto was fighting suddenly vanished from around him. The ground began to shake before he could ask what was going on. Like something out of a horror movie, people who looked like zombies crawled out of the ground, looking like genin who had failed the exam and died. Naruto just stood there and stared at the horrible scene, even as the dead bodies came out of the ground, armed to the teeth. It was just an illusion, but a very strong one. This shouldn't be hard to get past. All he had to do was find the illusionist. He let the shards fall out of his eyes like snow, showing the Hyakurai again, after taking away the Kyokugen's weakness. She jumped back behind a tree as bright lightning started to dance off of Naruto. It danced and cut into the ground when he let go of it. It moved quickly up his body and cracked as it went back into him. "Where are you?" Naruto asked in a mocking voice as he started to look for his prey. When he asked her a question, she told the zombies to attack the boy. "Not going to answer, are we?" he asked himself in a sour tone. He quickly moved to avoid being hit by a sword blow and then sent a lightning bolt through the dead body. Someone with a spear came at him, but he jumped up and landed on the tip, then kicked it hard in the head, which made it fly like a soccer ball. Another jump was made because a very dangerous dead genin with a warhammer came up behind him and smashed everything in his way. Naruto hit the angry zombie in the back with a shuriken and then sent out a lightning bolt that killed it. Zombie's body parts flew all over the place. Finally, before he even touched the ground, he pulled out 2 fistfuls of senbon and threw them at everything. He charged up his bioelectricity as the illusions came at him with sounds that sounded like they were hungry. He then jumped back into the air by using a zombie as a jumping platform. He used the Senbon as lightning rods to destroy a huge area with a loud thunderclap that could be heard all over the forest. As he landed, he smiled, and the illusion went away as Shizuka fell from behind a tree while holding her ears. Naruto asked in a sarcastic tone, "Oh, did that hurt?" She glared at him and then dove out of the way of another silver chakra blade that was coming at her. Just as she disappeared, he sent out a kunai that was charged with electricity. It hit the tree closest to her with a lightning bolt. The huge plant broke into another huge shower of splinters. She went in and out of being invisible as she fell to her knees and put her hands over her ears again. Shizuka jumped up to fight, but a blast of chakras sent her flying through a tree. 2 senbon stabbed her in the shoulder as she skidded across the ground. She quickly pulled them out and yelled, "Shit!" But before she could drop them, a bolt of lightning hit her from across the clearing. The girl with fiery hair was thrown through the air like an anvil, and when she hit the ground, she made a big hole in it. Naruto walked slowly into the damaged area and saw Shizuka lying in the middle of a crater. She looked like she was not awake. She was bleeding from one side of her mouth and from her ears as well. What a loser, he sneered as he walked up to her limp body. If he were normal, he would have noticed that he sounded too much like Sasuke at that moment. As soon as he got close to her, it felt like hundreds of thin spikes had been stuck through every joint in his body. He was stuck now. He looked down and saw Shizuka touching his foot with only her index finger while smirking. This made him very angry. As she stood up, she tried to say, "I'm not," but had to hold herself up by her knees because she felt dizzy. "I'm not out yet." After finally being able to stand up straight, Shizuka quickly did a bunch of hand seals, and a green glow spread across her hands. She put her healing chakra over her ears and they started to heal right away. Then she moved on to her body and fixed any shrapnel, stab, gouge, or other wounds she had gotten. She worked slowly, though, because it was clear that healing wasn't her thing. Bitch. Naruto cursed through clenched teeth because he couldn't move his jaw through the illusion. She walked up to him slowly and said, "Loser, huh? Looks like you're the stupid one here. You just had to fall for such an obvious trap." Things moved faster in an instant. Shizuka told her to stop bragging as the clone burned up. Naruto popped out of the ground below her and hit her with a sledgehammer uppercut before she could figure out what had happened. But Naruto wasn't done yet. He grabbed Shizuka's braid and swung her over his head while he was in the air above her. She hit the ground so hard that it broke. Shizuka only had a second left to look up into the sky. Her eyes grew wide when she saw the last clone crash down on her with an axe. Kick, powered by the lightning that the copy had focused into its foot. As soon as it hit the girl who was lying down, there was a huge explosion that threw the real Naruto flying backwards from the attack. Unfortunately for the blonde, he hit a stone that was in his way and fell headfirst into the ground. He felt pain all over his head. He looked up and saw that the sky was getting darker around his eyes. Everything in his body was going numb, and he couldn't move. He quietly said to himself, "Damn," while making a face, even though he was falling asleep faster and faster. And I was just having fun too. As soon as Naruto closed his eyes, the rush of chakra stopped. The cool chakra changed into the natural blue type, and his body started to warm up right away. The silver hairs on top of his head quickly turned back to their original blonde color, and so did the size and color of his whisker marks. There was silence for one more minute before Naruto moved. He was known for having happy, clear, crystal blue eyes that were well defined and sparkling when he opened them. Naruto's whole body felt numb at first, but when he moved, he jumped up and screamed, "Bloody murder." He yelled at the top of his lungs, "It hurts like hell." He could only say that it felt like his chakra coils were being ripped out of his body. He fell back to the ground and hugged his chest hard while he breathed hard. The pain finally went away after what seemed like forever. All that was left was a dull, throbbing headache that wasn't nearly as bad as the rest of his body. He tried to stand up slowly, but every second a sharp pain hit him. He dropped to his knees because he felt sick. Naruto couldn't take it any longer, so he threw up and fell over. When he opened his eyes, they got bigger when he saw that his vomit was silvery. He was scared when he saw it because he didn't know what his Kyokugen could be doing to his body. He tried to stand up again very slowly and with even more care. When he stood up straight, he wobbled, but he didn't feel anything stopping him. His headache hurt like it was ripping his brain apart, but it wasn't as bad as the pain that had been ripping through his body just seconds before. While he was trying to ease his growing headache, the smell of skin on fire hit him. He quickly found the source of the awful smell, putting aside his problems for the time being. When he saw Shizuka's unconscious body with fresh burn marks all over it, he couldn't speak. Naruto turned to look around him. His eyes got bigger as he took in how much damage was all around him. Nearby trees that were barely standing were split or splintered, and the ground around him was scarred by craters. It looked like a fierce battle had happened there. He slowly stood up with one hand on his goose egg and asked, "What happened?" He felt like he had passed out after Haku and Kyuubi. He had a dream that he was falling into a deep hole and never coming up again. He felt more and more of himself being torn away with each second that went by in the middle of nowhere. Being in a place he wasn't used to and waking up all of a sudden was strange. It was like waking up in the middle of a movie. Naruto had no idea how Shizuka had been beaten or why his body was suddenly in such good shape, other than the fact that he was in a lot of pain sometimes. He was not making progress with this, so he should think about it another time. The headache was already making it hard to think clearly. Slowly getting up to avoid having another spasm, he walked over to Shizuka, noticing that his eyes were clear. He frowned when he realized she still had his valuable glasses. Naruto looked down at her empty body. He really did hate her, but he didn't want to leave her there. It was not in his nature. He couldn't let her stay there in a rude way, even if she was the most dangerous opponent he had ever faced. Naruto sighed and forced his hurt body to pick up the quiet girl, even if it was only for a moment. He wasn't expecting her to be so light. He was surprised to find that she was surprisingly bony when she was in his arms. She felt as weak as porcelain, but he wouldn't have thought that after the 2 fights they had together. Naruto quickly walked over to a nearby tree as he forced himself to breathe. He put her down and propped her up against the tree once he was close enough. Naruto remembered that Komoruta girl still had his goggles, so he quickly found them in one of her cargo pants' many pockets. Natsu thought to himself, "Ah, man," as he looked at his goggles. He made a face as he looked at the broken parts of the Dojutsu that used to protect his even more valuable secret. One lens had so many cracks that it looked like it was about to break, and the other was completely broken. It looked like the secret was about to be revealed. He stood up straight with an angry groan. Being careful not to damage them even more, Naruto put the broken goggles in a pocket on the inside of his jacket. He hoped that someone in the village could help them get away. In the land of waves, Sasuke and Sakura had worked hard to find out the truth about his limit. They were about to get it. He was very angry about it. He slowly walked out of the clearing before anyone else could attack him after another sharp pain made him hold his hurt side. The blow that Sasuke took to the face could only be called a cannonball that came from a cannon that was over 100 feet long. He skipped across the ground like a stone on water until he hit a tree at the other end of the clearing. Sasuke got on his knees and vomited blood again. He then looked for Orochimaru. When he looked back at where his enemy had been, he saw that the snake man was gone. Orochimaru came up from the ground below before the Uchiha could do anything. The Uchiha was thrown into the air with one punch to the stomach. In the middle of the pain, Sasuke felt someone grab his shirt. He looked in horror as the Sannin's hand had grown far too long. Then he was tossed around in the air and hit the ground hard. He was thrown into the air and hit the side of a tree as he tried to dig his nails into the ground. Before he could try to grab something, he was thrown into a big rock. He almost cried out in pain. In spite of the pain, Sasuke quickly got a shuriken and the strongest wire he could find after being hit on the ground by the last attack. He used his Sharingan and swung the throwing star around the arm that was attached to his shirt as he was thrown into the air again. Sasuke pulled as hard as he could on the wire, which cut into the arm. One of the points went through it. "You little jerk," Orochimaru said to himself as he let go of Sasuke, but Sasuke looked more amused than hurt. Even though he was on the ground, Sasuke still had his hand on the arm and pulled the string to his mouth. He then showed a set of hand seals. Sasuke screamed through the wire in his mouth, "Fire release, dragon fire technique." A huge stream of fire started where Sasuke was standing and went down the wire in his arm, aiming straight for his body. This shocked Orochimaru. "Not bad, Orochimaru said with a raised eyebrow of approval as he burned up. The clone turned into yet another puddle of mud, but Sasuke used his Dojutsu to follow the movement and saw that Orochimaru had taken to the air. He pulled out 2 kunai with wires so quickly that not even a Chunin could catch him. He then threw them at the pale jerk before he could get away. Sasuke moved the kunai around Orochimaru's wrist as he landed on a tree branch, using his eyes to guide him. As the man moved to cut the wires, Sasuke sent another fire wave down them. As he got free, Orochimaru jumped out of the way just in time to avoid getting badly burned. When Sasuke heard the growl, he ran up the side of the tree where the animal was sitting. When Orochimaru saw the boy coming, he threw a shuriken fan at him. Now that Sasuke could see the weapons, he did a short set of hand seals. Fire release. Ember shot. From the palm of his hands, small fireballs shot out and hit the shuriken in midair, sending some back to attack Orochimaru instead. Orochimaru jumped from the tree and grunted to agree with the boy's strategy. But Sasuke's quick blasts hit him, leaving a small path of destruction in his wake. There was something strange about the way Orochimaru moved through the trees. It was more like he was swimming between the branches like a snake. When the fireballs were over, he ran down the side of a tree toward Sasuke, who was ready to land. As soon as he got close enough, he hit the genin with another hammer punch, but was shocked when a log took the boy's place. At the same time he jumped backwards and growled. He watched as Sasuke did a high speed dive that hit the ground under him. When the Uchiha spun and let go of a fan of kunai, Orochimaru drew his own and blocked the attacks. When he was really scared, Sasuke jumped at the distracted Sannin with a loud roar. Sasuke made the snake master fall by doing something so risky and daring that it caught him off guard. Orochimaru almost hissed as he turned his attention back to his enemy after rolling around on the ground. Before the snake could come back, Sasuke fired more shuriken with wire, but they missed the older man completely. Orochimaru gave a smirk. What a joke. He couldn't finish because Sasuke pulled on the string that held him to the tree and cut his skin with the almost invisible wire. As Sasuke went over the necessary hand seals, he thought, this is the last of my chakra. He felt tense. I'm going to put everything I have into this attack. This can end. As the last of his chakra surged into his hands, his muscles tensed up. Right in front of him, the whole area caught fire in an instant. The fire moved so quickly down the wire that Orochimaru didn't have time to move his kunai pouch. The fire hit so hard that the tree trunk the Sannin was tied to turned into ash right away. Without its base, the tree that was still standing fell over. The bird screamed and ran into the air in a panic. When the smoke cleared for a moment, Sasuke looked at where Orochimaru was stuck. It was impossible for Sasuke to find any part of the man's body. He smirked and thought that he had vaporized the man along with the tree. I won, Sasuke was sure of himself. He looked back and put his hand on his hurt arm. As he walked away, he said one last time, that was for Sakura. When a laugh that sounded like a snake rang through the clearing, Sasuke stopped dead in his tracks. Don't think you're victorious for even a second. The Uchiha slowly turned around and watched in horror as Orochimaru melted out of the ground with no damage to his body. He stepped back to be safe as Orochimaru smiled so hard that his skin felt like it was coming off his bones. Sakura's fight with me was fun, but the one we had together was much more exciting, he said with a smooth voice as he took a step forward. I have to say that at first I had my doubts about you. But as the battle went on, you stepped it up, which was impressive and really great of you. You'd be a good person to receive my gift. When Sasuke heard that, his eyes got even bigger. He muttered, shit, and got ready to run away. Sasuke turned around and ran as fast as his legs could carry him because he knew what the snake freak was trying to say. That was all Orochimaru could say. No matter how good the genin was, they could never get away from an S. Class Shinobi. He ran off after his game and disappeared in a blur. I need to get Sakura and leave this place right away. In his mind, Sasuke yelled out of fear. He put his hand on his neck because he didn't want to feel like one of those weird seals was being put on him like Sakura had. He wouldn't let himself be marked in any way. When he saw Sakura's unconscious body, he smiled. So far, everything was going to be fine. Right then, Orochimaru appeared out of nowhere, blocking his safe teammate from being free. When Sasuke came to a stop, he was shocked to see the monster. You can't run away from me, he told the boy with dark hair. Orochimaru grabbed Sasuke by the throat just as he balanced on the heel of his foot to spin around and run away. It happened so fast that he wasn't able to keep up with it. The snake had extended his arm again, making it impossible for him to get away or fight back. It hurt a lot as Orochimaru slowly pulled his prey in. Sasuke stomped his feet on the ground and did everything he could to get away. He tried to get Orochimaru's fingers off of his throat, but the more he tried, the tighter he would hold on. When he was finally close enough, Orochimaru lifted him into the air. Sasuke clenched his teeth as he stared into eyes that looked so much like death's that they were almost real. Soon, Orochimaru hissed, happy to have caught what he saw as the ideal body for his mission. Sakura and you will come to me to get the power that you both want so badly. And I'll give it to you because I'm a kind person. Sasuke was scared as he saw Orochimaru's fangs get longer and he dug his teeth into his shoulder with a sound like a snake getting ready to bite. No matter what, Sasuke's whole body was in unbearable pain, and all he could do was scream. The world around him seemed to slow down when Orochimaru dropped him. Before he hit the ground, he could feel his body going numb for a split second. He didn't really doubt that he was going to die, but he did wonder. It made him want to cry for himself and for Sakura. Were they going to pass out? As he fell, he turned his head and saw Naruto. He would have smiled if he could. It was clear that he beat that jerk, but he still found him. He got there just in time, though, which was a shame. The blonde had been shocked by everything she saw. As he watched his teammate fall, his fingers that were holding on to a nearby tree dug into the bark. It was clear that he was shocked. He was shocked as he saw Sasuke hit the ground. And those eyes. Just before he passed out, Sasuke caught a quick glimpse of a circle of mirrors that were the clearest blue. He could no longer see anything else. Because his fingers were stuck in the tree, he couldn't feel the pain. As he watched Sasuke's body fall, he could only hear his own heartbeat. It was like time slowed down around him, as if it wanted him to see everything that he was seeing in all its painful detail. As Naruto listened, the sound of Sasuke's body hitting the ground seemed to echo through the whole clearing, like thunder nearby. Orochimaru looked down at Sasuke, who was unconscious, and sneered meanly. He was proud of the new targets he had caught. Just to find the Uchiha was his plan, but then Sakura had to appear out of nowhere. He saved her Kinzokuden as a wildcard for a later time. But for now, they both had to get bigger. To want power so badly. As soon as they both had that, they would go look for him. And just who are we having here right now? He asked out loud as he became aware of another presence. He turned around and lost his oily smile when he saw the last member of Uchiha and Haruno's team. Oh, it's just why. But he stopped in the middle of his dismissal when he saw Naruto's eyes for the first time and saw the silvery Dojutsu. He fell in love with her eyes right away because they were so beautiful and elegant. The Sharingan, on the other hand, was just an ugly weed next to this lovely rose. Orochimaru knew deep down that there was no other bloodline limit like this one. It was something much rarer than anything else. Broken mirrors showed his likeness, and the snake Sannin stared at his cracked and distorted reflection for what seemed like forever. It looked like a snake staring at itself in the mirror and swaying back and forth as it tried to figure out what it was seeing. No matter what, he never took his eyes off of Naruto's beautiful eyes as the boy slowly moved over to Sasuke's prone form. That pair of eyes was just as important to Orochimaru as the Sharingan. He had always liked Dojutsu, after all. Naruto stood on top of Sasuke and let his arms hang at his sides. He had no idea why or how long he had been staring at his teammate's face. What made him care about his rival's health all of a sudden? It was strange to look at his opposite in the person who looked so much like him without feeling anything. Naruto asked, "What did you do to Sasuke?" His voice was cold and calm, and his fists were balled up. Naruto's eyes made Orochimaru feel jealous, but he didn't say anything. He didn't know what they could do. There were still a lot of crazy ideas going through the Sannin's mind, and each one was better than the last. His eyes seemed to be fixed on something stronger than the Sharingan. Orochimaru knew a thing or two. Even though it had only been seconds since he saw this amazing limit for the first time, the wait was unbearable for him. Naruto's voice got sharper as he said, "Damn it." At that moment, chakra and cold air filled the air. "Answer me. What did you do to them?" The boy was finally forced to look away from the silvery Dojutsu when the air around him turned cold. Chakra was rising from Naruto. At first, it was just warping the air, but as the seconds went by, it became clear. Like thin, silvery smoke rising slowly into the air. Naruto threw his sight to the ground and put a shadow over his eyes. Orochimaru blinked in surprise as silver shards fell out of his eyes like snow. Before they even hit the ground, they disappeared. After that, the snake Sannin stepped back because things were getting dangerous. When the chakra exploded, the boy's hair turned into a head full of silvery metal strands. His whisker marks got clearer and looked less like birthmarks and more like metal that has been scratched. "Answer me," Naruto yelled as he raised his head and looked into yet another mirror. He saw a spinning Sharingan with silver pupils in its eyes. Orochimaru was so shocked that he almost jumped backwards. He had never seen anything like this in all his years. This Sharingan was not real. Still, there it was, spinning like the real thing. "I'm going to kill him," Naruto thought in a scary way. "I need more. I need more." The chakra became even stronger, and as it tore itself away from him, it almost screamed. As Naruto dug deeper into his infinite reserves to get even more, the air around him cracked and snapped with cold. It got so cold that frost started to form. Orochimaru was shocked and put up his hands to protect his face from the sudden, biting cold. No matter what it was mean and scary, and the meanness got worse with each second that went by. It was sickening to feel the raw emotion moving through the chakra. Even though Orochimaru had always said that death was the only thing he was afraid of, this show made him feel threatened. He also couldn't think of the last time he felt so excited. Waiting for a battle that would be better than even Sasuke. Kun's made his blood boil, even though it was cold outside. Two sets of lines showed up on Naruto's face. He could feel the raw, biting cold going through his skin. One set is high on his cheekbones, and the other set is at his temples. Silver that looked a lot like his tears fell from the holes. In a split second, a sharp pain shot through his head, and the slits opened wide to reveal two more sets of eyes. From across the clearing, Orochimaru's eyes got narrow. It was clear that this was not a normal limit. He had seen a lot of different things, but nothing like this. Could it be? Wide eyes lit up the shinobi that looked like a snake. When he was in Akatsuki, that was the only other time he had seen a limit the least bit like this one. But that was. Could he have seen another transcendent limit, one of the three great Dojutsu? As the pieces fell out of the new eyes, Yamato's coal. Black eyes on his temples and Iruka's brown eyes on his cheeks could be seen. At that very moment, lightning danced around him, making his show even more impressive. Silver and actinic blue clashed and danced with each other, making what might have been the brightest show anyone could ever see. Not even the Rin'negan. Orochimaru was amazed and stood still, even though a huge wave of power hit the clearing and made his hair move behind him. "I never thought I'd have such power, but now it's so close. Of all the people who could have such power, I never thought it would be you." He licked his lips in excitement and smiled in a crazy way. "Uzumaki Naruto, show me this power." Almost as if to answer his question, Naruto suddenly grabbed all the lightning around him. The Raiden danced and coiled around them with more power than any Raiden master could ever handle. He charged forward, leaving a trail of lightning and static behind him. Orochimaru quickly moved through 5 hand seals. Wind release. Windstorm arrows. He jumped into the air, and his lightning arm pushed back. While he did this, his Sharingan copied Orochimaru's jutsu and saved it for later use. A chakra filled hand was held out by Orochimaru, with the other hand just above it. In the same area, wind gathered, getting stronger and more violent. As Orochimaru pushed his hands forward, time seemed to slow down for both of them. He filled the jutsu with as much chakra as he could. In the same way, Naruto sent all the electricity he could make into his right hand. As the two attacks met, wind and lightning danced around each other as the two fighters fought for control. While she stared off into space, Hinata sat quietly against a tree and hugged her legs. A short distance away, Shino and Kiba were setting up the campsite they had picked out, while she kept watch with her Byakugan. In general, she was a nervous person. And in a forest like this, where she could easily become lunch for a huge animal, her already weak nerves were on edge even more. The first 30 minutes she spent in the forest were the worst of her short life. It was hard for her to sleep because she was afraid that another genin team would attack hers. She only wanted to leave this place. She wanted to show everyone that she wasn't so weak, though. For Naruto-kun to see how strong she was, and for her family to know that she was more than what they thought she was, she did this. She might even be able to get her dad to agree with her. She looked up at the tree canopy. Long beams of sunlight could be seen through the leaves. A few of them hit her in the face and lit her up from behind. Hinata almost jumped out of fear when something moved in front of her. She stood up nervously, getting ready to either defend herself or run for help from her teammates. She dropped into a rough, gentle fist stance and turned to face where she saw it. When Hinata saw what she was looking at, she dropped her stance and stared in awe at the butterfly that had landed on the trunk of a nearby tree. The butterfly was almost as big as a dinner plate. It had iridescent wings that were the deepest shade of red. They looked like they had been painted with a blood-soaked brush. A calm voice said, "That is a beautiful butterfly." Hinata knew what to expect from her team because she had been with them for a long time. Even more than Naruto-kun, Kiba was rude and loud. Shino was shy and quiet, but he was also incredibly loyal to his team. Additionally, Shino liked to appear out of nowhere, which scared Hinata a lot, but she was used to it by now. With a big smile, she looked at her teammate and then back at the butterfly. "Yes, it is," she said in a low voice. "It's called the blood-covered lady," Shino said to start. "It's a very rare species, found only in this forest." Hinata thought to herself, what a sad name to give it. Indeed, even the legend behind that name is a sad one. It is said that the blood-covered lady used to be a gentle lavender color, but it turned into its present red when a lady forged a deal with the goddess Amaterasu. She pricked her finger, and the drop of blood was said to have stained the butterfly's wings for the rest of eternity. Why did she prick her finger? Haiku asked. It's possible that Shino was the last person she thought would be good for making legends. Shino calmly replied, "The story says she did it to save the life of the person she loved." Butterflies and the ephemerality of their existence are often used as a symbol for the transience of life. However, the story deviates from there. One ending has it that the lady died shortly afterward as the cost for her lover's life. Another claims that she eventually found another person to love, while the final version says she lived a happy ending with the person she saved. Hinata didn't say anything as she looked at the butterfly some more. She had no idea that such a strange creature would have such a story. Was the story real? Of course, a happy ending for the lady would have been great if she had lived, because stories need them. When the blood-covered lady gently pushed off its perch, it flew through the air very slowly and gracefully. When it got close to Hinata, it hovered nearby, making her want to put out her hand for it to land on. She did what she was asked, and the butterfly landed gently on her open hands, wings folded and closed. Shino didn't smile very often, but Hinata could see a smiley face on him. With such a beautiful tragedy in her hands, Hinata smiled in a sad way. "As luck would have it," Shino said. Hinata told him, yes, but she kept her eyes on the bug she was holding. The red butterfly took off slowly and gracefully, spiraling through the air as it flew by the tree canopy. Hinata kept looking at the spot where it had gone, thinking she was the luckiest person in the world. "We found a safe place to camp," Shino told her, breaking the sudden silence in the clearing. Hinata finally looked at him and gave him a quick nod. She went with Shino as she turned to leave, but she couldn't help but look back at the spot where she had first seen the red butterfly. Hinata was sure that it had been a sign. But was it good or bad? Were they going to turn her into a bloody lady? Who was going to save her if she was? Both of the attackers were pushed back by the force of the two hits. When Naruto landed a while ago, Orochimaru had only moved a few inches, but his arm felt like it had several thousand volts of real electricity running through it. "You little brat," Orochimaru said with a chuckle. Naruto jumped back up, and as he ran toward the wood beast snake, his hands flashed through seals. As soon as the last seal was broken, 3 wood clones jumped off of his back and into the air, raining wooden spikes down on their target below. It was Orochimaru who asked in shock, "Mokuton as well?" He easily avoided the attack by jumping backward. The spears hit the ground where he was standing, poking holes in it. But the clones were already chasing him as he hit the ground, throwing more wooden weapons at him. As the real Naruto appeared out of the sky above him, Orochimaru jumped out of the way. Another lightning strike hit the ground. It was possible to avoid the explosion, but at the same time, all three of the wood clones jumped at him. Orochimaru laughed at how cocky they were, and a snake slithering out of his sleeve hit all three of the clones, shattering them into pieces. Orochimaru had to say that he was being pushed even though he thought he wouldn't be. To stay ahead of the silver-eyed boy's angry attacks, he had to push his own skills all the way down to low Junin level. There was no doubt that Naruto-kun was not like other genin. It was already known that the boy had a Kyuubi, but he had no idea that the boy also had a limit like this. He stopped thinking right away when Naruto came out of the smoke behind him with both arms pulled back and a fan of white glowing kunai in each hand. Orochimaru saw right then that Naruto's eyes had changed again. He couldn't tell right away what color the pair on his temples were because they had turned a stormy blue while the other one held the Byakugan. How very interesting, the Snake Master thought to himself as he blurred away as Naruto threw the kunai, leaving craters in the ground in front of him. After pulling out a shuriken, the blonde pushed the metal full of as much chakra as he could in an instant. When the Hawaido chakra was pumped into the throwing star, it literally grew until it was even bigger than a normal Fuma shuriken. He threw it to the right, just missing Orochimaru as the Sannin pushed himself off the tree. The super dense chakra and the path of destruction that it left behind went harmlessly under him by a few hundredths of an inch. As soon as Orochimaru landed on all fours, he jumped out of the way again because the ground beneath him had suddenly turned into jagged ice. He then jumped off of another tree as a ball of ice exploded against it. Orochimaru yelled with joy, "This is amazing." He threw out an arm at Naruto and stretched it out very quickly as he fell. Naruto switched his Byakugan for the Sharingan and dove out of the way of the attack. Orochimaru just used his failure as an excuse to pull himself toward the blonde, his snake already out of his sleeve and ready to bite. Naruto jumped out of the way just in time as Orochimaru hit the ground hard enough to make a cloud of dust. The blonde grabbed a branch nearby and swung himself up on top of it. At that moment, Orochimaru jumped out of the cloud of smoke, leaving behind a blurry picture. A quick jump up the side of a tree put him next to Naruto with a punch ready. His target just barely saw him with his Sharingan and tried to avoid him, but he still flew through the tree. Orochimaru jumped through the hole he had made and then punched Naruto in the gut again. But the silver blonde had switched his Hawaido chakra for the Hyakurai again, firing enough raw electricity at his enemy to power the Hokage tower. When Orochimaru landed far away, his arm went numb and sparks flew off as he watched Naruto hit another tree so hard that it broke the back. Clever little brat, Orochimaru almost said, actually impressed by how smart the boy was. Naruto got himself out of the tree branches, but he was limping as he stood up and tried to limp to his opponent. It was clear that he had broken bones in several places because his legs were bent in an awkward way. The boy said, I can't lose. I have to stop you for hurting my precious people." Naruto let out a sickening crack, which made the former Sannin wipe the smile off his face. Right in front of his eyes, his legs were straightening up and getting better. Naruto started to walk, and as his legs slowly got better, he sped up. He finally gave one last snap of his bones and ran as fast as he could. He yelled to himself, "Faster!" as he closed the big gap between himself and Orochimaru. Faster! Faster! Orochimaru jumped back when he saw the boy coming toward him. He smiled creepily and left one hand hanging. A snake was already coming out of his sleeve to bite Naruto as he ran toward him. But all of a sudden, Naruto sent out a spike of chakra, and the boy was gone with a loud crack and a blur. The next second, Orochimaru turned his raised hand over and saw that it was cut off at the elbow. To his shock, his arm was completely torn apart by what seemed like an invisible enemy, almost exploding into hundreds of bloody pieces. Orochimaru saw what happened when he looked back. Naruto's sandals and the legs of his pants were both ripped apart. What was left were his legs. Naruto's legs now looked a bit like a horse's hind legs from the knees down. He had hooves instead of feet, and the bones in his feet had grown longer until his heels looked like a second knee turned around. But that was the only thing the legs had in common with horse legs, or any legs of any other animal Orochimaru had seen. The heel continued to stick out in a scary looking spike, but instead of going straight from his raised ankle to his knees, his legs went in the same grotesque shape twice more, pointing forward, then backward, and then forward again until they reached his thighs. But from the knee, the flesh had split into 3 separate pieces. The middle piece made the zigzag shape, like an obscene Jacob's ladder, and the other 2 just went down on either side to connect to the middle of his foot bones, halfway between his ankles and hooves. It was a shape that was meant to be fast, and the leverage that the many joints provided was meant to propel him at very high speeds. Every inch of the surface was covered in silvery skin that was filled with silver chakra. "There's no doubt now," Orochimaru breathed, his eyes burning with a cruel desire as he held his bloody arm. This must be a transcendent limita just like the Rin'negan. The answer from Naruto was to disappear. In an instant, Orochimaru jumped to the side as the tree behind him burst into flames and fell over. When the smoke cleared, Naruto was seen standing over the badly damaged stump. His face was bloody and his body was covered in scratches. Orochimaru jumped up on a branch and said, "You've gotten faster. But what is speed when you still can't control it?" Naruto meant to say that he would flash through the seals his Sharingan had seen Orochimaru do before very quickly. When the silver blonde girl held up her hand to the wind, the snake man blinked and then let out a surprised breath. Naruto. Kun's Sharingan really was as real as it could get. What came next was not the same as Orochimaru's first attack. It was so much more. Naruto had his chakra increased, so he put out his hand and a huge volley of wind chakra arrows fired at him. Orochimaru could only curse for a second before the attack tore his body apart. After taking so much damage, the clone could no longer hold itself together and fell apart into a puddle of mud. Naruto, on the other hand, already knew what his opponent was planning. He jumped so high into the air that a wind release, great breakthrough tore through the ground he was standing on. Naruto landed on a branch and kicked it off as quickly as if he had been shot from a cannon. He disappeared in a blur of speed and crashed into Orochimaru where he was standing, all while the snake Sannin tried to use another ninjutsu with one hand. The boy was thrown off by Orochimaru, but before he could do anything else, Naruto's form vanished in another burst of speed and reappeared behind his opponent, his changed feet doing their job. He quickly flashed lightning in his hand and threw it all at Orochimaru, who screamed out in pain. But that turned out to be yet another earth clone because it too turned into harmless mud. Before Naruto could figure out where his opponent was, the clone in front of him caught his attention, and he suddenly hit the ground hard. When Orochimaru put his foot on the boy's back and pressed down on his head, he pinned him to the ground.
There was a lot of chakra on both of his hands and feet because he didn't want to be hit by what he knew to be a body.
Manipulation limit based on bioelectricity. Orochimaru smiled to himself and said, "Incredible. Just incredible. Your speed is excellent, but even you have to stop if you wish to attack, and if you do keep moving you'll just run into something. That's its weakness. Even your Sharingan can't see at those speeds." Naruto's sudden compression of chakra was the only thing that could have warned him before he was thrown several feet into the air by a wave of almost physical chakra. Before the snake Sannin could hit the ground, Naruto's shape became fuzzy, and out of nowhere, several sharp ice spears went through Orochimaru's body in several places. The boy with silver eyes showed up in front of him again just as the pain was starting to hit him in the head with a kick from one of those badly deformed legs. It hit with so much force that the ground shook, and a sickening crunch could be heard through the air, which meant that bones and skulls had been broken. The body of Orochimaru and Naruto both landed at the same time. When he turned to face it, the chunky head smiled at him, making his eyes widen. The body started to glow, and then there was a huge explosion that shook the area. The bomb Sasuke made earlier might as well have been a firecracker next to that. It looked like Orochimaru was half rising and half slithering out of the ground. He scoffed as the smoke cleared. Even though that was a bit rougher than he had liked, the battle was already very impressive. It was tough to say what level Naruto Kun could really fight at. When he fights, he could be as good as a mid level Junin one moment and as bad as a Chunin the next. As the smoke cleared, a spinning dome of water appeared near the center of the explosion. It looked like the Hyuga's famous heavenly spin but in water. As the blonde clearly pulled off all of these tricks, Orochimaru grimaced and narrowed his eyes. He had no idea what was coming next. All of a sudden, the dome broke. The water exploded out in all directions and frozen into hundreds of sharp pieces of ice that covered the whole clearing. Orochimaru quickly fell back to the ground, just missing the attack before it could do any damage. Naruto was breathing hard.
He had just barely made it through the clone-grade explosion, which wasn't easy given how far the technique's damage reached. Another thing that made him fast was that it let him speed through the ice release, ice shard seals. It was too bad it missed the snake. Freak because there wasn't any blood in the damage around it. But then all of a sudden, his whole body felt like it was on fire, and his legs and feet hurt very badly. He held back a scream and fell to his hands. He was in so much pain that he fell to the ground and howled in anger. He curled up into a fetal ball in his sleep, as if he were trying to keep himself together. Orochimaru carefully melted out of a tree. All of a sudden, he could no longer feel that dangerous chakra. When he saw Naruto writhing on the ground, he wasn't sure whether to be relieved or angry, so he took a full step out of the tree. Orochimaru muttered to himself, "It looks like playtime is finally over." He was mad that his fun was cut short because this mysterious new limit seemed to be weak. The body seemed to be under a lot of stress from moving so fast and changing shapes so clearly. Naruto. Kun's pain threshold seemed to have been reached. How depressing. And I had been having so much fun, too. Naruto stuck his head out to look even though it hurt. He only had his original eyes left on his face. The others melted off, revealing smooth skin, all while Orochimaru watched. Even though the irises were broken, they wouldn't change into any limits. They wouldn't even listen to any mental or chakra commands he gave them. The silver armor that had been around his legs melted off, revealing them to be human again. His hair went from being metallic silver, white to being blonde again, and his whiskers returned to looking like they did before. As Orochimaru knelt down next to his new obsession, he shook his head in disappointment. He was so scared for his life that not even Zabuza could calm him down. He said to himself and to the boy, "I would have never guessed. I never would have thought you, out of all of them, would have had such an incredible gift." He used the only hand he still had to pick Naruto up by the throat. "Please tell me the name of this wonderful limit of yours, and I will spare your teammates. The Sharingan is no longer of any use to me, not now that I have seen yours, nor is the Kinzokuten girl. They have now become a burdensome. For now, all you need is to tell me the name of your limit." Naruto gagged to protect his windpipe from being pressed on. If telling this snake crazy his limit was the only way to save Sasuke and Sakura. Chan, then. Naruto choked out, Kyokugen. His mind was lacking oxygen and he was going in and out of sleep. Orochimaru gave a creepy smile. Such a splendid name as well. How very poetic. He let go of Naruto and threw him to the ground as he turned around. "Please don't take my little seals. I don't want to ruin such a wonderful prize. Unlike many others, it is unnecessary." He stopped and looked over his shoulder with one of his twisted smiles on his face. "Eventually, you will come to me, just as Sasuke, Kun and Sakura. Chan will come to me. I will give you everything you have desired, Naruto. Kun." Naruto would see the monster again and again. In the blink of an eye, Orochimaru was gone, and a scary laugh echoed through the clearing behind him. Naruto dragged himself painfully to a nearby tree. Every time he moved, he felt pain shooting through his body. He really wanted to scream, but he couldn't. He was in the most pain in his legs. They were so hot that he could hardly feel them, let alone move them. It felt like someone was slowly driving a stake through his head, making him think that his head might break at any moment. Only his arms hurt a little less than the rest of him, but they were still enough for him to lean against the tree just in time for another spasm to hit him and twist his face in even more pain. He had to gasp for air and take big gulps of it even when the pain was gone, because he was hit by another wave almost right away. He might have been treated better by Orochimaru killing him instead of this. Someone. Anyone. Stop it, he whimpered to himself as a silver tear ran down his face. Strangely, as soon as he said that, a warm, soothing feeling went through his body. It took away the pain and woke him up from the edge of unconsciousness. At the same time, he thought someone was gently rubbing the side of his face to make him feel better. Naruto closed his eyes and hoped against hope that he was just having a bad dream because of the pain. He felt bad when he opened his eyes though. The Kyuubi was just in front of him. As usual, she tried to look and act as luxurious as possible while still maintaining an air of superiority. It looked like she was even more cocky than usual, but she wouldn't show it because she thought it was rude to brag. She asked him, "How are you?"
as she ran the back of her hand over his face. "What do you want?" was the first thing that came to Naruto's mind, even though he said it more sleepily than he meant to. In response, the Kyuubi only clucked her tongue and shook her head in a stern way. The sneaky smile on her face, on the other hand, took away any concern that gesture might have shown. "Such distrust, Naruto-kun. I'm simply saving your life, that's all. It was I that cut you off from the Kyokugen during your fight with the man. Snake. I believe you would recall that burning sensation you felt, which lasted for only a matter of seconds." "Bitch," Naruto yelled, his head drooping to one side from being so tired and hurt. "I didn't have much of a choice. Otherwise you would have lost yourself to the Kyokugen," she said, her face softening to show she was genuinely sorry. She gently held Naruto's head in her hands and turned his face up so that he could see her beautiful red eyes. "Weren't you begging for more power? Didn't you demand for it?" Naruto whispered. "I wanted to save them." His eyes were half lidded as he slowly became aware of how difficult it was becoming to stay awake. She shook her head. Naruto was pulled closer by her. "I could have given you power. Do you see? This is what happens, the price you pay for flying too close to the light." She leaned in close and gave him a soft kiss on the forehead. Though she was pulling away, Naruto could feel a warm feeling going through his body. "Let's talk more in a better environment," she stated. The boy was really excited about going to sleep, even though he didn't want to be near Kyuubi at all. He liked the idea of seeing Haku again, though. It was clear that the Jinchuriki didn't want to close his eyes. He couldn't have wished for sleep to come faster. Naruto could see himself in the familiar mirrored sewer of his mind as soon as he opened his eyes. It was much brighter when he came back here the last time. The mirrors had fixed themselves, and the water looked cleaner and more silvery. He remembered how much he liked the sight of a beautiful mind more than this place that looked like it was full of rats. Even though he was pretty sure there weren't any rats in Haria, or at least he hoped there weren't. Naruto didn't want to think too much about the idea of rats inside his own mind. Now, though, the realm was back to how it was before dark, with broken mirrors and cloudy water. Naruto sighed and stood up, making it clear that he was not in any pain. He walked slowly through the murky water that was only up to his shins. The red light at the end of the tunnel led him to Kyuubi's entrance hall and prison. It seemed like the walk was shorter than before, but that might be because he had been this way before. When he carefully stepped into the huge room, he was hit by the terrifying atmosphere of what was beyond the Golden Gate. It was made even scarier by the fact that two eyes, each much bigger than Naruto, were staring at him from the other side. "Welcome back, Naruto-kun," a soft voice said. Naruto saw Haku standing next to the huge cage with a genuine smile on his face. Haku was happy to see Naruto. This boy with dark hair wore a kimono that was as white as new snow. He almost seemed to glow in the dark. When the Kyuubi came out from behind the pillar sized bars, she narrowed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the gold bars. Naruto yelled, "Haku!" with a smile so big that it split his face in half. "It's so great to see you again. Even if it was just a half an hour ago." "Yes, it's nice," Haku said with a smile. Kyuubi's growling voice snapped out, "Naruto, get away from that boy." Both boys looked at her, and Naruto's face showed a mix of confusion and anger at being interrupted by the girl. But that vixen didn't notice because she was staring at Haku with a very angry and hateful look on her face. "He's the reason why you almost lost yourself to the Kyokugen." Naruto yelled and rubbed the side of his face in anger. What the hell is she complaining about now? He looked at Haku and asked, "Do you know, Haku?" in a more normal voice. But then the dark-haired boy's face changed to one of confusion as he looked down at the water with his hands held almost modestly behind his back. He tried to ask, "Haku? What's wrong?" That boy shook his head sadly, as if he were trying hard not to cry. "I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun. I don't want you to lose yourself because of your own power, but if you ask, I can only oblige." "Huh? What do you mean?" Kyuubi sneered, knowing that her true self had erased any signs of politeness she had shown before. "It's because he is what represents the Kyokugen here in your mind, brat. If you had continued to use that damnable power of yours, you would have lost it all. Everything. And nobody would have been able to save you." "What?"
Kyuubi let out a frustrated sigh. Fine. Let me explain it then in a way that your feeble mind can understand. If you had delved any deeper into that power, the result would have been the same as using the higher stages of my own power. Your character, your personality would have been replaced by another mind entirely. He said. Wait, Naruto cut in. You mean using the Kyokugen is like using your own power? Kyuubi gave a haughty nod. Naruto would be much more careful using his valuable transcendent limit now that that was out in the open. Blonde and Fox both looked at Haku. Haku let out a sigh. The Kyuubi and Ioi too are like the two sides of a single coin. One of us might be considered a representation of the light, while the other is representative of the darkness. Constantly, we struggle between on another for the right to be the one to give you our power. I do not want dominance so much as the Kyuubi does, however both of us will give you power only if you ask for it. You are a being of gray, Naruto. Kun. A being of the twilight, neither light nor dark. You have the choice, which power to use. Haku shut his eyes. But at the same time, you must also choose which cost you must pay in order to use that power. Naruto asked, how much? You mean I have to give something up in order to use the Kyokugen? Haku gave a nod. Not just the Kyokugen's power, of course. The same goes for the Kyuubi's power too. Kyuubi laughed, but the two didn't show that they heard her. Do you remember what I had said? The cost for either is quite great. Naruto rolled his eyes because he didn't like where this was going. What's the cost? Kyuubi gave them an evil smile as she answered. The price of the Kyokugen is your human sanity. While the price of the Kyuubi's power is your humanity itself, Haku replied, enjoying the Kyuubi's grandeur a bit too much. The demon was so hurt by that one statement that it turned away in anger and disgust. Naruto had to turn his eyes away from both of them while he tried to process what he had just heard. He finally realized that no matter what path he took to power, he had to give up something. His hands were clenched tight into fists. Even in this, it looked like everyone was against him. He thought he had finally found something that could give him the power he had been desperately seeking, but it had to bite him in the behind. Was he really cursed to be looked down upon and weak forever? The boy looked up at Haku, who was sad and smiling. Naruto-kun. That is the truly beautiful thing about curses. Even though they may harm you when you use them, at the same time, they can only make you stronger as well. The blonde sighed and tried hard not to cry as he said, but why can't I get stronger? No matter what I use, it'll only kill me in the end. Though Haku said, not if you use it correctly, Naruto. Kun. Naruto felt a new sense of hope come over him. As I said, you are a being of the twilight. Neither light nor dark. You have the power to choose. As long as you do not delve too deeply into one or the other half, the other will always be there to rescue you. The Kyuubi saved you this time, did you know? Oh. Yeah, Naruto mumbled as he turned around and saw Kyuubi waiting for him. He could remember what she had said about cutting him off from the Kyokugen during his fight before he fell asleep. He had never thought the vixen would be someone who cared about him. That's correct. Kyuubi thought to herself, keep being crazy and thinking I really care about you. She had to use all of her willpower to keep her vulpine face from showing that she was happy. It only means I'm one step closer to leaving this awful prison for good. At that point, I will finally get back at that jerk Madara and Konoha too. It took Naruto a long time to say it, but he finally did. I suppose I should thank you. He looked like someone had just pushed something unbearably bad. Smelling under his nose. I had been hoping for something more polite, the huge vixen said in a prim voice, making it clear that she was trying to get as much moral high ground as possible this time. But I suppose that will have to do. For the moment, anyway. Naruto snapped back. Why don't you just enjoy the fact that I complimented you for once? Or did one of your tails happen to get stuck up your ass? Kyuubi's eye looked at him with a dangerous look. The blood. Red iris and slit. Open pupil gave off a glow that was almost like fire. If looks could really kill, that look would have turned any lesser being into nothing more than a steaming pile of shredded meat in an instant. But Naruto was in fact not less important. Kyuubi snubbed and turned the other way with a huff of pride. Naruto smiled. Show him where you are. So far, he had been able to barely beat the Kyuubi by making clever comebacks. Naruto. Kun, Haku said. The boy with whiskers stopped bothering Kyuubi to talk to his dead friend. I hate to admit so, but indeed must use Kyuubi Sama's power from time to time. He quickly yelled, "What did you say?" He was thinking that Haku must have used drugs when he was alive. It was almost like Haku could read the blonde's mind because he shook his head no. Ah, yes. Kyuubi smiled and turned her attention back to the two people outside her cage. This brings us back to our next point. During your battle with the man Snake, you were on the verge of unlocking the higher echelons of power that your Kyokugen offers. She breathed deeply. Naruto blinked and turned his full attention to the giant vixen. What she said strangely caught his attention. Because of the state of your mind you had descended into by such usage of the Kyokugen, she said, I was forced to inject some of my own chakra into your coils, in order to prevent you from being lost to it. Unfortunately, this caused severe damage to your chakra coils. Like throwing water onto a sizzling hot pan of oil, the two chakras, the Kyokugens and mine, cancelled each other out violently. Although the Kyokugen caused much more damage to your body overall in the end, she added, almost as an afterthought. The boy with the curse asked, what are you getting at? His face showed that he was very serious. That means your coils were damaged enough that a normal shinobi would be unable to use them for a very long time, at least months, if not years. Kyuubi shook her head irritably, tired of explaining something so stupid. But thankfully, you are not normal. My chakra can heal the coils in less than a day. The catch is, however, that you have to use it. Naruto asked the demon again, so I have to use your chakra? This time the demon looked at him. What happens if I don't? Simple, she said, lying down on her behind like she was bored. It would take weeks for your body to recover if you don't. But then there's also the threat of not fully recovering. That's where the Kyuubi comes in, Haku said, and the demon vixen gave him a mean look for being rude. She would be able to heal the damage that I caused. You didn't, Naruto quickly said to make Haku feel better, but Haku shook his head no. It was a gentle question, do you remember? I am what represents the Kyokugen within you. It is indeed my fault, Naruto. Kun. The water in front of Haku caught Naruto's attention, and he couldn't take his eyes off of him. He really didn't know what to say about that. Not like many other people, his choices were now affecting every part of his life. It was the worst kind of crash course in trade. Offs and compromise. He wished he was normal like everyone else, so he wouldn't have to worry about his choices going wrong and hurting him and everyone else. But he had to stay alive first, before anything else. Now, in order to save Sasuke and Sakura-chan, they had to choose between giving up one thing for another. He walked over the Kyuubi without feeling anything, which made the vixen very happy. She almost smiled with pride, but she held it back because she didn't want to scare the boy away. He had been poked and prodded for a long time, and now it was her turn to use her power over him. He walked next to the cage's door with a step that looked almost submissive, and a silver tear fell down the side of his face. He knew what she wanted, and the more he thought about it, the worse it made him feel. He stopped about a foot away from her cage and asked, so what's going to happen now? Even though she didn't show it, Kyuubi was so mad at Shukaku that she would have happily choked the stupid tanuki until its head came off like a stuffed animal if he had been nearby. She had to give Naruto her power way too long ago, and now the little shit had stopped just feet away from her cage. If you put a fish between a cat's eyes, you should see it go cross-eyed. It made me look bad. But when she spoke, the Kyuubi's voice didn't sound hostile like it always did, even though all she wanted to do was make a joke that was very sarcastic. You were going to lose your ability to use the Kyokugen for a time. Unleashed as it was causing you significant damage, and the fastest way that I can heal you is to suppress it for now. All of my power is gone, Naruto said in a low voice as he wiped his tears away with the jacket sleeve. Kyuubi snorted because those words hurt his feelings. My power, brat, has an arsenal of abilities as numerous as the Kyokugens. Don't assume I am going to leave you with nothing at all. She paused as she remembered a final thing. Keep in mind, however, that as long as my chakra runs through your coils more heavier than usual, the color of your eyes will be different. At least you won't have to wear those damned goggles. Naruto's face fell again after that short smile. He turned back to Haku and took out the soft boy's glasses, broken and all. As Naruto held them out, Haku didn't know what he was seeing at first. But after a second, he understood. Naruto carefully touched the one lens that wasn't broken and said, "I'm sorry. They were broken in my last fight with Shizuka. I didn't mean I didn't want them to get broken." "Don't worry about it," Haku told him softly, smiling again because he was having fun. "They served me well when I served under Zabuza-san. I'm only glad that they've been just as useful to you as they have been to me. I'll make sure they get fixed." The blonde held the broken glasses tightly in his hand and carefully put them back in his pocket. Slowly, his real smile started to come back to his face. "I promise." When Haku said yes, his smile got even more beautiful and warm. Hearing that Naruto-kun would keep his word, like he always did, made him feel good. The blonde still thought about him after he had died. Naruto's true smile in that one picture of him looking at him showed a lot about his spirit. Naruto's heart was so beautiful that it made the moon and even the stars look bad. Every flower would look sad next to it. There was no doubt that his soul was cleaner than Haku's. That could be why he was stuck in the gray area, between light and dark, able to choose but never affected by either. As Naruto turned back to Kyuubi, the fox was now dressed as a person and tapping her foot impatiently. It seemed like every time she stepped on the water, tiny waves spread out. She told him, "Stop taking your sweet time." For this, she had to wait way too long. She was sure that she would start pulling out her hair if she had to wait any longer. "Sorry," Naruto groused, frowning at how impatient she was. "Aren't we a little moody today?" After that, it looked like a light came on between his eyes. That light was something Amino Iruka both knew and feared because it meant Naruto had just found a new, horrible way to trick someone. "Don't tell me you're..." he gasped in jest, PMS. "Ing? Okay, that prank wasn't too bad." Still, she got a deep blush that was as red as her hair all over her face. It was from both shame and anger, though the anger was stronger. She hissed, "You little brat. Now get over here before I lose my temper." Naruto took a deep breath and almost teleported the last foot of space between them. He stood there dead straight, and Kyuubi carefully and slowly put her right hand through the bars. As she gently touched his cheeks with the pads of her fingers, his breath sped up. He felt warmness spreading through his body. He could feel the raw, burning chakra going through her fingers and into his coils. It wasn't as strong as the last two times he used it, though. While he was breathing, strange feelings sprang up inside him. A love he had never felt because he had grown up in a village where people looked down on him, happiness and unbridled joy, accomplishment and want, and a true sense of belonging in a place where he knew he was always welcome. But when he looked at Kyuubi's face, which seemed calm, he knew she was just making him feel that way to make him want to come back for more. Even so, the feelings were just as addicting as any drug. The sly Kyuubi smiled when she saw Naruto calm down. He got caught on her hook like any other fish. If someone asked her, she would gladly and freely say that she was a needy jerk. What could she do, though? That damnable limit of his had to stay away from him, or she would never be able to control him. But if things kept going the way they were, she might be able to get him to let her go in the end. He wasn't even close to being stupid enough yet, but maybe one day. Naruto shed a warm tear that he hadn't had since the fight with Haku. It was so mean of her to make him suffer over these feelings he had. He was drawn to her even more and wanted to feel more of the feelings he had always wanted to taste. He was in the presence of one of the most evil beings in existence, and she would do anything to get what she wanted. But the thought of his loved ones waiting for him brought him back to reality. He took a step back, away from the Kyuubi's touch and the feelings he had wanted so badly his whole life. When he opened his now red eyes with dark pupils, they were filled with utter hatred, even though his face didn't show it. "Don't you remember what I told you?" She said this while putting her hand back through the bars slowly. He didn't fight her when she gently took his hand. He closed his eyes to try to keep from crying as those forbidden feelings rushed through his body. Even though she didn't send any chakra through her hand, Naruto knew she had already healed him. She told him in a soft voice, "I know you better than you know yourself. You're so called favorite people will never know you as well as I do. I have everything you could ever want. Naruto, don't lie to yourself. Don't turn me down." She pulled her hand back into the cage, leaving Naruto alone. He shivered when his hand felt cold all of a sudden. He missed the warmth Kyuubi had brought with her. She turned around and started to walk back into the depths of her cage, but her face couldn't be read.
Naruto jumped forward out of habit and yelled, "Wait!" But he ran into something invisible between the golden bars. He fought and pushed against it, desperately trying to get through. Every move he made ripples appear on the clear surface of the barrier. Kyuubi looked over her shoulder at the boy who was pressing himself against the shield, as if that were enough to get her attention. His wanting eyes locked with hers and begged, pleaded for more, but she turned and disappeared into the dark. Naruto's eyes got bigger, and as she walked away, his strength seemed to leave him. He hit the ground hard and fell to his knees. The water ran over his legs and feet. More and more things became clear to him. He lost. This time, the Kyuubi won. He danced happily right into her trap and into her hand. She only needed an inch of leverage, and she used it to its fullest. She played with his feelings, and he let her. Even now, it was so sweet and addicting that he would give anything to feel those loves again. The world around him jerked and turned around, which was a sign that he was becoming aware again. But he didn't care. He was too broken to care. And even though he opened his eyes, he was still in the same place, on his knees, staring straight ahead but not seeing anything. All around him were the broken and bloody landscapes from his fight with Orochimaru and the bodies of his teammates who were still asleep. Naruto slammed his fist into the ground below him to let out all of his anger, frustration, and hatred at not being able to do anything. With the red chakra flowing through him making it stronger, the earth buckled and cratered as it couldn't take the blow. He then broke down in quiet sobbing, warm, wet tears running down his face as he talked about how he felt. Naruto finally held back his tears after what seemed like an eternity. He hugged himself while tingling. When he tried to focus on the present, those feelings kept coming back to him. He couldn't think straight. Oh, Kyuubi. He had never thought that anything living could be so mean. She was heartless, rude, and lacked honor. Only herself and her own plans. Naruto crawled over to a nearby tree and leaned against it as new tears ran down his face. He was almost out of strength. He was really worn out. He felt tired in every way, emotionally, physically, and mentally. Even though his body didn't hurt anymore, his heart felt like someone had cut it. It didn't bother him if someone killed him right now. His only wish was to sleep. To get away from everything. After that, Naruto Uzumaki shut his eyes and went to sleep.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.